Hello, this is Storybooks channel. New videos are posted every day. Subscribe and click the bell.
Mommy, what's that you hear? 5-year-old Camille stopped talking and listened. Who's that? Is someone crying? Camille didn't make it up. Camille started, but suddenly she heard a long, pitiful moan. Wait, Stephen, what is it? Frightened, she asked her husband, who was walking next to her. Today, on New Year's Eve, they decided the whole family to go to the slide, to go sledding. Their eldest son, Christopher, 8 years old, ran ahead with a friend, and they leisurely walked behind, talking about their own and sledding the younger Camille. She was the one who heard it. The first strange sound was moaning coming from deep in the woods. Wait here, Stephen turned to his wife. And I looked. What is there? Maybe you need help. You only gently asked the wife. But the man no longer heard her words, moving away into the thicket. Camille stepped from foot to foot, and suddenly it became really scary. Even the chatterbox Camille became quiet. And rising from the sled, she came closer to her mother. Camille, shouted Stephen, suddenly appearing among the trees. Everywhere sleds. The slide is canceled today. Why was Camille whining? But when she looked at her anxious father, even she realized that something out of the ordinary had happened. So she quickly calmed down. What's wrong? Camille asked, but the husband only waved his hand, saying, You'll see, while the woman called her son and explained that they were not going to the slide today. Christopher excused himself to go sledding with a friend and promised to return in a couple of hours. Stephen pulled the sled out of the woods. Camille gasped. On them sat bent over a small, dry-eyed old woman. Her hands were trembling and her face was all bloody. She was all beaten up. The husband exhaled. She'd been in the woods at least 400 hours. She says she got here early in the morning. Only she couldn't get up light. Must have a broken leg. The man was darker than a cloud. But how she got here, came out at dawn with a broken leg, could not understand Camille. The children had taken her out, the old woman said in a low voice. They left her to die. I was in the way of their lives. A stinging tear rolled down the wrinkle of the old woman's cheek. Camille could not say anything. She seemed numb for a moment. How could this be? How could this have happened? They turned around and walked quickly toward the village. Its outermost houses faced the woods, and the family lived in one of them. Camille looked at the old woman. She was clean and apparatus, her worn coat and shawl lined in her hands. The old woman's eyes were flushed from the cold, and she tried to rub them away. Camille took off her mittens and held them out to the old woman. Thank you, Emily, she said with tears in her eyes. Evelyn, is that you? To say that the woman was surprised is to say nothing. But how could it be? It's me, Emily. And quietly cried the elderly woman. Evelyn was a neighbor of Camille's parents. Well, not exactly a neighbor. She lived in the next 5-story building. But everyone in their yard knew each other. And besides, the woman worked as a head teacher at the local school where Camille studied. The woman always stood out neatly and tastefully dressed on her head. A neat hairstyle, always extremely polite. And Evelyn was also very kind and never raised her voice even at the most egregious bullies. She knew all the school children by name, delved into children's problems, and was always ready to help. So those children, families, which could not be called prosperous, but the certificates entitling them to free lunches, they could not provide. At the head teacher's request, they were fed free of charge in the canteen. Evelyn was ready to take responsibility in case of emergency. She herself was a math teacher, so she took extra classes with those who were preparing for the use or just didn't do well. Naturally, these classes were completely free of charge. Evelyn's husband worked as a supervisor at the Russian railroad, so the family was not poor. They had 2 children, a daughter Jenna and a son John. The difference between the children was a good 8 years. The woman thought well that her daughter would be able to help me a little, and she would be able to manage at home. However, as soon as the woman returned home from the maternity hospital with the baby, she realized that the idyll was over. The daughter took it badly. "Look, Jenna, it's your baby brother. He's just a little baby, defenseless. He needs our support and love." The mother turned to her daughter. "Take him away." Jenna ran in. "I don't want him here. Grandma said you'll love me less when you have a baby brother. That all the toys and candy and everything would go to him." "Jenna, come on, daughter. How can we love you less? Get him out of here." The daughter threw a tantrum, and the woman realized she just wouldn't. "Evelyn, I see where this is coming from." Her mutual dislike of her mother-in-law, which had been going on since they'd known each other, was taking its toll. Robert's mother, to her husband Evelyn, considered herself elite. She was always in power at the time Robert and Evelyn met. Wendy, a student at the pedagogical school, was the deputy head of the district administration, a position of respect and money. Therefore, the female student barely dignified a glance. This girl, in her opinion, was unworthy to stand next to her son. A great future awaited Robert. To this, the mother was ready to make every effort. And one of the components of a worthy position in society was, in Wendy's opinion, a successful marriage. "Kolenka," the woman said to her son, "will you take a good look? Don't take it out on me. Kevin, the plant manager, has a daughter a year younger than you. She's beautiful, smart. She's going to study in Moscow prospects there. I don't like her." "Mom," answered Robert. "And Sophia, parents are older economists. The dream is just a quiet, calm, responsible mother." "Mom, I'm going to marry Evelyn," Robert said firmly. And he did. His mother-in-law couldn't change his mind. But then she got the best of her. Everything the girl did was wrong. No matter how hard she tried to get along with her husband's mother, she just hated her. "What are you, Mashka?" Wendy assiduously called her daughter-in-law that way, not responding to her request to call her Evelyn. "What are you cooking?" squeamishly squeaked. She dangled a spoon in her plate. "Borscht," and without raising her eyes, answered the girl. "Borscht. And what about the potatoes? Why did she cut them in such pieces, like cabbage with noodles? Where did you sing such borscht?" "Of course I did. And that's what you ate in your remote village. We'd be ashamed to offer it to pigs." Wendy knocked the borscht into the garbage can and turned to nothing. "God didn't send word. Can't even feed a normal family. Where did your eyes go?" It was already addressed to his son. Robert tried not to get involved in women's quarrels. He thought it was not a man's business. There was no one to protect the young woman. Her work was criticized. She earned pennies. Clothes are nothing but poverty. Manners of behavior of the village did not want. Therefore, as soon as there was an opportunity to move from her mother-in-law, Evelyn grasped it as a lifeline. Her husband, as a young specialist, was offered a job, and with it housing in a neighboring village. "Don't even think about it," her mother shouted. "Only in the capital you have such prospects." However, Evelyn made it clear to her husband that if they did not leave, they would not live together. The guy did not want to leave under his mother's wing. It's convenient to remain a favorite 10, not a man, an earner. And the head of the family was convenient, and the fact that the mother and in their village all knew and respected. She was not the last place in the local hierarchy. That is, all roads were open for Robert. However, he did not want to lose his young wife. He had married for love. Therefore, no matter how his mother persuaded him, she did not promise him golden mountains. The young people left, gave them a one-bedroom in a new building, which eventually managed to exchange with extra payment for a good two-bedroom apartment in a dormitory neighborhood. After that, the mother-in-law hated Evelyn even more and demonstrated it in every possible way. Wendy very rarely came to visit them, and when she did, she tried to show her daughter-in-law her superiority and wiped the dust with a napkin. She pushed the young woman in her face and found stains on dishes and cabinets. No matter how much my daughter-in-law tried to talk to her, to convince her that this was her and her husband's home, Wendy claimed it was my son's apartment. You're here temporarily, so I'm making sure you don't litter. The husband didn't react to his mother's remarks, as usual, and didn't get into a fight. Evelyn tried to cross paths with her mother-in-law as little as possible, to the point that on her rare visits she went to spend the night at a friend's house. Wendy, of course, tried to impress upon her son that his wife was going out, but she was not ashamed of her lover. But he didn't react to it. He knew where and why his wife was going. However, it lasted until Jenna was born. After that, the young mother couldn't leave home with a baby in her arms. However, and Wendy turned out with the birth of a granddaughter settled down. Perhaps she finally accepted the inevitability of the situation, or maybe she just lay low. However, she accepted and even loved her granddaughter. She picked up Evelyn and Jenna from the hospital with her son. She brought good, quality skates and diapers, bought somewhere on a blat, and even imported diapers brought by someone from abroad. She worked her ass off around the baby. And change and wash. And walk always, please. It seemed even with the fact that the mother of her favorite granddaughter, Evelyn woman, little by little reconciled. Although, of course, she continued to poke her nose, daughter-in-law, in her blunders. And then with the birth of the baby became more time at the young mother became much less, and teach mother-in-law very much liked and feed. Morality is not so and kicks. Not right and juice is already time to give. And diapers should be ironed on both sides. Evelyn barely survived the first year of her happy motherhood. Thankfully, my mother-in-law lived in a neighboring village and even worked. Otherwise, she would not have given her life at all. It was also saved by the fact that they lived in a one-room apartment. Wendy liked comfort, so her son did not stay long. Time passed. Jenna went to kindergarten, and Evelyn went to work. Now her husband and daughter could go to Wendy's on weekends without her. She had made it clear that she would not miss her daughter-in-law. However, after that weekend, the daughter arrived completely different. Wouldn't listen to anyone or anything, robbed her, even did things out of spite. Grandma said, "I can do anything," said girl, "but you're bad. You don't allow it. Robert, please talk to your mother. Tell her not to turn her daughter against me." The woman asked for her husband. "Bah, you're not the one who needs to talk, you talk. I won't quarrel with my mother," he always answered. "And she doesn't turn her daughter against you. It's all a fantasy." As usual, the husband hid his head in the sand. Evelyn tried to limit the daughter's communication with her grandmother, but it was also ineffective. Mother-in-law began to call and scandalize, pressured her son, and he quickly gave up. He got used to obeying the authoritarian mother. That's the way it was. Jenna had the best of everything. Everything she wanted, her mother-in-law bought for her. Her husband also spared no expense for his favorite daughter. Because of that, the little girl grew up capricious and spoiled. "Buy and buy, and buy me this doll," screaming and stomping her feet in the store. "No, you have almost the same one at home. Just yesterday you came from grandma with a new belly button." Next time tried to convince her daughter. "Woman, you're bad," screamed the girl. "My grandmother buys me everything I want. I'd rather live with her. I hate you." The next weekend, Jenna would come back from her grandmother's with a doll like that. And it was like that with everything. It was as if the mother-in-law was deliberately trying to make her daughter hate her mother. And now Jenna. But he's so little. Evelyn wouldn't stop trying. "I don't want him to live here," you shouted the girl. Jenna, my sweet woman, wanted to hug her daughter, but she pushed her away and ran to her room, slamming the door loudly. Evelyn leaned against the door and cried. With the birth of John, their home only left peace when their daughter left with her father to visit her grandmother. Evelyn could take a break from the constant scandals. Mother-in-law, by the way, to the birth of a grandson took a very cool attitude. She called her daughter-in-law on the phone and either congratulated or reproached her. "Now you have a girl and a boy. I hope you don't plan to have any more children. No gifts, no weekly visits, no guidance. None of that with John." Jenna became even more estranged from her mother. Every chance she got, She went to her grandmother, who idolized her favorite granddaughter. "Daughter, please watch John. I need to go to the store to get bread." The woman asked her daughter, "I don't need him. I won't watch him." She defiantly went to her room. "Well, then go get bread." In the back of her daughter shouted, "Mother, you need to go." "You go," she replied, and as usual, slammed the door. And in the evening, Robert, returning from work, scolded Evelyn for the fact that, having spent the whole day at home, she had not gone for bread. The relationship with her husband was also beginning to deteriorate. The enthusiastic love was gone. Character traits that she hadn't paid attention to before began to emerge. It turned out that Robert is not only a mama's boy, but also a big lazy. He would go to his mother's house on weekends to avoid helping his wife with the baby. Wendy welcomed her son in every way possible, didn't stress him with chores and responsibilities. At his mother's place, he could just lie on the couch for days, tucked into the computer or TV, meet with school friends, sleep until dinner, that is, feel like a little boy again. He liked it very much. But at home, he tried to show himself a real master, and he could be nagging about the cleaning, like the dust on the windowsill for a week in cooking. Why is there soup from yesterday? He has to do with relationships too. You see, he wants the love of a husband, and the wife is all busy with the child. By the way, John was a very cranky baby. He continued to have infantile colic for a long time, and the boy at night almost did not sleep with him, and Evelyn. Mother-in-law came to visit them until the first birthday only once for the discharge from the maternity hospital. That is, there was no help from her. My husband thought that taking care of the baby is exclusively a woman's business. He didn't take his son in his arms very often, not even to walk him or feed him. Jenna was out of the question. Her daughter would not go near her baby brother. So Evelyn managed alone and was completely exhausted. In the summer, Wendy offered to take Jenna to the seaside. She got a trip to the Crimea. Evelyn couldn't help but let her daughter go. Besides, she'd had another scandal. She firmly decided to go with her grandmother. Her husband was often late at work, and in general did not hurry home. There waited a tired wife and an eternally crying child. It seemed to the woman that she alone needed John. Mother-in-law and husband were completely indifferent to the baby. Therefore, she tried to love the baby for everyone. Her love for him was boundless. The mother tried to compensate for the dislike of the baby to her relatives. Time passed. Jenna was already in 6th grade, John in kindergarten. Evelyn went to work, unable to stay at home any longer. Not much had changed in the family. Jenna still disliked her brother and tried to hurt him. She would push him, hide his favorite toy, or tear his drawing. The boy cried and complained to his mother. However, her daughter did not put in anything. In the first place in the girl was still her grandmother and father. That, by the way, paid less and less attention to his family. It was work or friends or hunting. With Evelyn, they had little in common before. Everything asked for love. But in time, they became strangers, almost never spoke, totally disinterested in each other's problems. To be more precise, Evelyn tried to talk to her husband, to establish contact, but he was not interested at all. He brushed off her attempts to change things. Evelyn plunged headlong into school life, the kids and the worries, the holidays and parent-teacher conferences, helping to take her mind off her own problems. Soon, however, the problems became impossible to ignore. Her relationship with Robert became increasingly strained. "Cole, what's going on?" Evelyn brought it up one day. "You've become a stranger. We haven't talked for 100 years. We don't go out together like we used to. What are you making up?" "It's okay. I've had so much work lately. I can't keep up. And here you are with your conversations that you have nothing to do." My husband resented me. The conversation did not go well. The woman fought sadly. She felt that it was not about work at all. Late return and the subtle scent of expensive women's perfume, the secret made manifest. Once on vacation, when Jenna was at her grandmother's, John at daycare, and her husband at work at the door of their two-bedroom apartment they had bought after giving birth. John rang the bell. Evelyn was surprised she didn't call for anyone. A young, confident blonde stood on the doorstep and regarded her cheekily without taking her eyes off her. "I'll come in," the damsel asserted more than asked. "Enter warily," muttered Evelyn. The stranger scrutinized and stared intently at the woman with a slightly contemptuous gaze. Evelyn. She caught the familiar scent of perfume. Here she is, she thought bitterly. What will it be about? She already knew. "My name is Vanessa," the stranger said confidently. "I am your husband's mistress. I can't say that I'm glad to meet you," tried to sarcastic Evelyn. But she succeeded badly. The girl appeared to pay no attention to her words. "Nee is going through a very difficult period," Vanessa continued. "He needs support, care, and love. I can provide him with all that. And I can't." The woman was even surprised. "And he's going through a difficult period. He has a new position as head of the department. It's such a responsibility." The girl rolled her eyes. "And yes, you can't do it. You always have problems, children to take care of, and knees need care and attention. And how do you know about my problems and concerns?" Evelyn asked defiantly. "How?" "From a Korean woman. He's been complaining to me himself," the rival replied. "And then he doesn't love you. You don't let him develop harmoniously." Evelyn suddenly laughed nervously. "I don't let him develop," she said through her laughter. Vanessa shrugged her shoulders in bewilderment. "This is weird," she thought. "I'm taking her husband away from her, and she's laughing." Evelyn couldn't calm down. Tears rolled from her eyes. And she kept laughing, and she stopped laughing, just as suddenly as she started. "What do you want?" she said tiredly, suddenly switching to you. The girl was even taken aback by this turn of events. She couldn't say anything, only flapped her eyes. "Do you want my husband?" asked Evelyn in the forehead. "So take him. I won't cry. Now go." The woman opened the door. "All right," Vanessa said as she left. "She's weird," she thought again. Evelyn was lying. After the student left, she sobbed for a long time, tucked into her pillow. Her whole life, her plans and dreams had all gone to hell. It was one thing to guess about the presence of a mistress in her husband, and quite another to see her with her own eyes. After work, her husband didn't come home. The children didn't ask questions. They were used to their father's late returns. Evelyn tried to distract herself. She checked her notebooks for a long time, played with her son, helped her daughter write an essay. She asked for help for once. At night, the woman did not sleep well. The children fell asleep, and she sat at the kitchen window and thought how to live on. Toward evening of the next day, Robert came to get her things. They went out to the kitchen. "I'm leaving quietly," the husband said. "The other day I will file for divorce. I'm leaving the apartment to the children. I won't refuse alimony, but it's better that you don't file. So I'll pay the right amount every month." "What am I gonna tell the kids?" That's all Evelyn asked. "Whatever you want to say. I don't care at all." Robert grinned. "It's not the kids I'm leaving you for. I'm sick of this domesticity. You're always tired missing borscht. You've seen Vanessa is young, and the wings are promising. And you. Once upon a time, you were like that too. Only it was a long time ago. You were different once," Evelyn said in her husband's tone. The door to the kitchen opened abruptly. Jenna stood on the doorstep. It was obvious from her face that the girl had heard the conversation between the adults, and she didn't like it. "Daddy, Daddy," for Reed, she did not go away. "Do not leave me. I do not leave you, and I do not leave you," answered Robert. "I'm leaving your mother. So it's your fault," exhaled the daughter with such anger that Evelyn was frightened. "All because of you. You can come to me," the man continued. "We'll go to Grandma's together. By the way," Vanessa turned to his wife, "beautiful, stroked with my mother. And you for all the years of our life together, and could not do it. Well, congratulations," Evelyn replied quietly. "I hate you," shouted Jenna to her mother. "Daddy, take me with you." Wait, daughter Robert obviously didn't expect this turn of events. I need to discuss this with Vanessa. All because of you, shouted once again the girl Evelyn and ran in tears to her room. Robert calmly packed his bags and was gone. Jenna never left the room that evening. And only little John, not realizing what was happening. He wiped the tears on his mother's cheeks with his hands and asked in a childishly naive way, "Mommy, don't cry. I love you so much." Life began in a new format. Jenna had hardly communicated with her mother before, and now she ignored her. The girl blamed her for everything that had happened. No matter how hard the woman tried, she could not get in touch with her daughter. One weekend, Evelyn got a call from her mother-in-law. "And I was thinking," she started without even saying hello. "Jenna's supposed to be in school for the second half of the year. I was just finishing up my first semester at school. It's better for everyone." Everyone who? Evelyn doesn't get it. Robert, for example. The girl misses him and has been calling almost every day. They've been asking to visit. What's that about? He's got a young wife just getting settled in. I'll have the girl with me and I'll feel better. My beloved granddaughter is near and Kolia's life will stabilize a bit. And who will think of me? Jenna is my daughter. She's not going anywhere. She'll be at her school. And if you turn her against me, you'll never see her again. That's the first time I ever raised my voice to my mother-in-law. Now she no longer cared at all about this woman's attitude towards her. "It's your own fault," my mother-in-law said. "You missed your husband, and now they're biting their elbows." No, they're not biting their elbows. And your son is not such a happiness to cry about him at night. He's gone. Good riddance, but I'm not giving you my daughter. Wendy didn't even stop talking. She didn't expect such a rebuff from her silent and modest daughter-in-law. "We'll work it out." That's all she said. On winter vacation, Jenna went to her grandmother, however, about the move, so did not talk anymore. After the new year, Evelyn and Robert divorced. The divorce passed without excesses. The man signed over the apartment to the children. Evelyn filed for legal alimony. "I told you to pay alimony." The ex-husband grinned. However, he paid faithfully. With the children, Robert did not communicate often. From time to time, took them to the shopping mall, water park, or any other entertainment. So Dad became a holiday for the children, and Mom almost a domestic tyrant. She made them clean and do homework, and go to gymnastics. Jenna, from the age of 6 years, was engaged in gymnastics, but often lazy and tried to hack. Her mom, on the other hand, rarely had to remind her daughter to practice. Therefore, Jenna's announcement that she will live with her father for Evelyn did not come as a surprise. "I'm going to my father," said the girl after another scandal about a double in math. "Do you think there will not have to learn lessons?" The mother was indignant. "Dad's normal. He won't give me a hard time about it. He's always understood me better than you have." "Well, tired," Evelyn replied. "Try it." Jenna was just finishing the first semester of 7th grade. The girl was an honor student. She was tutoring, and her mom was trying to help her with her studies. Robert was not happy about her daughter's decision to move in with him, but he did not dissuade her. The girl packed her things and went to the new home of her father and young stepmother. They lived in a cottage, which the man originally built for the family. He said that he had always dreamed of living in his own house, not in an apartment. However, Evelyn and the children never got to live in the new house. Robert brought his new wife, and Jenna moved in. For the vacations, as usual, her father took Jenna to stay with her grandmother. She took the trouble to call Evelyn. "Well, dear, have you had enough?" She started the conversation with a sneer. "Your daughter left you for her father. You're going to be alone. We'll see about that." The daughter-in-law replied calmly, "Time will tell. Hope dies last." The mother-in-law laughed. Olechka told how well she was received at her father's Vanessa, and she was given a separate room and clothes. They chose new ones together and went to a beauty salon. The girl is now at least a modern teenager, like the daughter of a tedious teacher, and it's all thanks to Swallow. She's such a sweetheart. God. Evelyn was pretending to be horrified. The daughter now has green hair and piercings. No, she doesn't have piercings. His father-in-law hissed angrily, and her hair is pink. Wendy, I don't mind my daughter looking like a normal teenager. Evelyn cut the conversation short. Jenna started the third quarter living at her father's house, not wanting to study, of course. She wanted to party and have fun. Besides, there was no one to control her here. Robert worked from morning till late at night, and it was enough for Vanessa that when she asked if you had done your homework, Jenna answered in the affirmative. Robert's new wife was more preoccupied with herself than with anything else. She visited the beauty salon weekly, went to the pool, and for massages was a regular at the fitness gym. Can I go there with you? Jenna asked her. Jenna, girl, wouldn't you be interested there? Vanessa replied. She was not at all happy about the prospect of dragging a teenage girl around with her. The young woman was used to freedom of movement and socialization. She didn't need any extra eyes and ears, so often Jenna stayed at home. One girl began to skip extra classes and gymnastics, could not show up for English for several days. Only Jenna had to go to school every day. Her mother worked there, and she had just become head teacher. Evelyn resented the gymnastics coach, Nancy, on the phone. Jenna had completely lost interest in classes. Goes 2 days later on the third. She's distracted, not trying. I understand, but I don't think I can help you right now. Let's just wait a little while. It's not critical. I'm counting on you. The coach replied. Meanwhile, resentment was growing at the Robert house. It turned out that being parents of a teenager is not so easy. Besides, the girl was not used to doing anything even in her own home. Returning home, Vanessa often made unwashed dishes and crumbs on the table. Jenna could take out bread for sandwiches and leave it on the table and fall asleep. She often forgot to clean out the refrigerator. Food would scatter her things, and her room was a constant mess. Vanessa didn't like to do chores, but she tried to keep the house in order. With their Robert schedule, it was easy. She usually cleaned. More often than not, she called a cleaning service once a week, and that was enough. Now she had to keep things in order. Every day, Jenna tried to make sense of it. She's a stepdaughter. You could at least do your own dishes. You didn't even put them in the sink. Left it on the table to fall asleep. I don't know how to do it, the girl said. At home, my mother does it. Your mother's not here, and there are no servants, Vanessa said. And I'm not going to be your maid. The woman collected her stepdaughter's things from around the house, candy wrappers and banana peels. That's it. I can't take it anymore, she told her husband one day. Do something. What can I do if you're a grown woman who can't get along with a normal teenager? The husband resented her. A normal teenager. It's your daughter who's a regular teenager. You spoil her. So it is simply impossible to live in the same room with her. She's my daughter. I can't kick her out. Robert ended the conversation. Vanessa began to go rogue. She began to tell her husband at every opportunity that it was better for the child to live with her mother, that she also wanted to have a baby with him. But living in the same house as Jenna, it would not be easy. Robert did not react in any way to these conversations. Vanessa's attitude towards Jenna had changed a lot. Now she was no longer happy that the girl chose to live with her father instead of her mother. And then Jenna got her 7th grade report card. It turned her from an A student to a C student. Robert was yelling into the phone. Wendy, don't you pay any attention to the girls in there. Your thankful one stays home all day. She should be taking care of the baby. And Jenna doesn't want to tutor her. And Vanessa's not a teacher. How can she help her? What about tutoring? The girl's been getting tutoring. The mother-in-law went on. Evelyn was doing that. I don't really know. I know Jenna's going somewhere, either English or math. What math? Her mother took math with her. Then I don't know, the son replied. Wendy realized something had gone wrong. She was an old school person and believed that education should come first. Besides, Jenna had told her that she had practically given up gymnastics. What do you do? The woman asked confusedly. I sit on the internet with my girlfriends, go for walks. I go to the skating rink, started listing granddaughter. And the grandmother suddenly clearly realized that there was nowhere good to wait. She decided to call Vanessa too. She's a woman. A mother-to-be must realize the importance of what's going on. The grades are bad. The new daughter-in-law wasn't surprised at all. So not surprised. She doesn't go near books at home. She's always out and about on the internet, and she never cleans up after herself. Throws things around the house on the bed. He can almost walk in with his boots on. Vanessa kept complaining. So you're raising her family now. My mother-in-law did. I have to raise her. She doesn't even notice me. I've begged her. I've scolded her. She's like a pea against the wall. Raised a girl. There's nothing to say. She's the only reason we fight with Robert. Vanessa said in her heart of hearts. Wendy realized that Jenna had to be rescued. Evelyn dialed her ex-sister-in-law's number. Have you forgotten about your daughter? What makes you think that? She asked calmly. The child has almost a D on her report card. You work at school yourself, don't you know? Shouted mother-in-law. And you don't yell at me, Wendy, knowing everything. But Jenna decided to leave not without your help. By the way, she doesn't want to study. She's even abandoned her extra classes. Robert lets her do everything, and his wife doesn't give a damn. She's not her daughter. We'll do what we're going to do. The mother-in-law asked tiredly. She remembered how she had unobtrusively treated Jenna last year. Her father has connections, and more prospects will open up before her, and she will have everything she desires. She was not justified. What can I do? We must bring the daughter home, said Evelyn. And so it was agreed. Meanwhile, at Robert's house, another scandal was brewing. Jenna had worn her new tracksuit to school without Vanessa's permission. When the girl returned home, her stepmother and father were already there. What's this? Looking carefully at her stepdaughter, Vanessa said, That's my costume. Why are you wearing it? It's not a big deal. I just borrowed it. Jenna replied nonchalantly. What's the big deal? I had no problem borrowing my mom's stuff. What's the big deal? No problem. Vanessa was starting to freak out. I thought I told you to take my mom's stuff and wear it. Don't you dare touch my stuff. You heard me. Don't you dare. Honey, why are you so nervous? Robert tried to calm his wife down. Well, she's wearing your suit. It's just a little problem. A little problem. You say yes, it's a daughter. Your problem is one big problem. She's the reason our family's in trouble. I don't like people touching my stuff. You know my stuff. I don't want some little kid going through my closet, screamed Vanessa. Jenna paid the price. Okay. The woman finally calmed down. Now it's either me or her. I don't want another minute in the same house with your ill-mannered daughter. Well, you again, disappointedly stretched Robert, glanced at the daughter, and ran to calm down. He raged at his wife. Vanessa was in her room actively trying to unpack her things. However, she did it not too quickly, so that her husband had time to get up and dissuade her. My dear, well, do not get hot. Affectionately addressed the man to his wife. She is still a child. Robert, I can no longer decide to change tactics, Vanessa. Let her go back to her mother. You can take her on weekends, go out with her, but I can't live like this anymore. Vanessa suddenly started crying, and Robert was just numb with surprise. He had never seen his wife cry before. Robert, I love you so much, the young wife continued. And I love Jenna, but she doesn't give me anything. It hurts me so much to be loved. Don't get upset, don't get upset, he consoled his wife. Vanessa realized the battle was won. Jenna, you're gonna have to go back to your mother. Robert went into his daughter's room. Why the hell did you study? I'm not wearing her costume anymore. It's not that great. What the hell do you care about that suit? My dad was outraged. We bought you a better one last week. Well, everyone at school has seen it, and it's not new. Jenna simply explained what she did. Well, it's not yours. Father tried to explain the problem again. So what? We are the same family." The girl didn't seem to understand. Her father looked at her carefully. "Why do you hate her so much?" "In the forehead," he asked, and Jenna turned away to the window. "Why shouldn't I?" With quiet anger, she whispered, "She's the reason you left your family. She's your main person now. See, you're even driving me away because of her." "I'm not," Robert tried to justify himself. "Yes, you are. I understand. A young wife is more valuable than a daughter. But she'll give you a baby too. Then you'll forget all about me." "Jenna, you're wrong. You're my favorite daughter. How can I forget you?" "You will. It's only a matter of time," the girl said sullenly. "I understand everything. I'm leaving for my mom's tomorrow." Jenna went back to her house, and Vanessa and Robert went on with their normal lives. But back home, the girl took it out on her family. She still didn't listen. Her mother insulted her little brother, yelled and threw tantrums. However, she began to study better and returned to gymnastics. Jenna graduated from school with a gold medal. She studied to spite everyone, as she said. She went to the Institute of International Relations, left home, as in the dormitory, and the girl did not want to live. Her father agreed to pay for her rented apartment. Home, Jenna came home very rarely. Called often too. Mostly when she needed to transfer money to her card. Life went on as usual. Robert and Vanessa had a son of their own by this time. Therefore, John was rarely contacted by his father. So did his grandmother, Wendy. She financially supported her favorite granddaughter, Adore Jr. Although she was not very welcome at Robert's house now, she had always been indifferent to John. The boy was often ill, not much needed by his relatives, so he grew up under his mother's wing. She tried to make sure that the son did not need anything, did not feel unwanted, so he became a likeness of the eldest daughter. How did that happen? Evelyn didn't understand, and she didn't believe it when people said bad things about John. In her eyes, he was the perfect child, unlike the straightforward and defiant Jenna. John did everything underhandedly. He had learned it when his sister was home. She used to hurt him a lot, so he'd sneak up on her. He accidentally pours a glass of water on her notebook, then hides all her pens, then molds the camera in her phone with plasticine. Miranda knew who was doing it. She'd get into fights, but the mother always covered the boy, like she didn't see it herself, and now she's blaming it on John. John liked the impunity of such behavior. He continued his activities at school. He rubbed the board on Athens, then one of his classmates poured water into his briefcase, then his desk mate let cockroaches into his pencil case, and he always got nothing to do with it. A good boy, the son of the head teacher, almost an excellent student. No one even suspected him of such pranks. Usually for his pranks received other habitual bullies of the class. However, soon the kid got bored. Not enough extreme. John took Parker, but it turned out to be dangerous and difficult occupation. You had to train a lot, and the boy didn't like that. Studying was easy for him. It was enough to listen to the lesson, and he knew the material. He repeated it at home, and it was done. John could not do sports. What kind of sports did his mother send him to? He didn't stay anywhere. As soon as it came to work and monotonous training, the guy gave up. Didn't last long. It was the same with Parker. John tried to run his blog, but again it was necessary to select interesting content. It did not work out for the guy to quickly become famous and get his piece of fame. Time passed. The older John got, the more problems he had with it. Class. The guy said that he was tired of studying, and he was quitting school. His mother barely persuaded him to finish 9 grades to go to technical school. By that time, the guy gathered around him a group of similarly not too purposeful boys, and they after classes staggered around the neighborhood in search of adventure. Naturally, John's academic performance dropped sharply. No one set him as an example. On the contrary. But that didn't bother the kid. "John, what is going on with you?" Mother tried to understand her son. "You have everything. Study. You'll get into the institute. As Jenna, you will have a good specialty and a job. Without remembering it, the son grimaced. Their dislike for his sister was mutual. Why do I need this? Who needs it now? It's your higher education. These official jobs with poverty wages, and without education I will find a great job. And if I want to shake my long, multicolored, Small recently painted it in the colors of the rainbow to protest against exams at school. Son, but with an education it will be easier to find a job. My mother wouldn't stop. Jobs are for wimps. This is the time of new technologies and solutions. The kid's argument was pathetic. I'm not going to work in a factory from dawn to dusk for pennies. You're not gonna make much money that way. How do you make it? Mother asked. It takes luck, John explained to his mother, and a little trickery. Soon Evelyn was called to the police. John was accused of attempting some kind of computer fraud. Thankfully, the attempts were not too successful. The friends didn't screw anyone over. And the fact that the guy was under 16 years old at the time also played an important role. They were fined and had an unpleasant conversation in the office of one of the officers. It was he who advised Evelyn to send her son somewhere for a while, so to speak, to change his environment. At that time, their school was issuing vouchers to children's health camps. However, they were for children of certain social categories, for the privileged, so to speak. But Evelyn managed to get one voucher for her son. Let him get a change of scenery, she decided, make new friends, maybe grow up. If she'd known where this trip would lead, she never would have bought it. But the mother only wanted what was best for her son. John had been stalling for a long time. He didn't want to go to any camp. No mountains, no skiing, no opportunity to meet new people. Nothing boded well for the guy. He could only be persuaded by the fact that the trip was to be during school hours. John was so lazy that for the sake of not going to school and not learning lessons, he was even ready to go to camp. Only you will give me 1,000 R for each day I spend there, the boy declared. But you're going for 21 days, the mother resented. Don't you think that's overkill? I'm telling you that you don't need a college degree to make a decent living, laughed the son. Am I serious? If you don't, I won't give you money. Evelyn had to give the son the required amount, and he finally agreed to the trip. The son went to camp, and the woman decided that she, too, could pull up her schoolwork and relax. John called, said he had arrived, was fine, settled in, and asked her not to call him again. He's not a little kid anymore. If anything, he'll call him himself. Evelyn wasn't even offended. She was relieved. She was calm for her son because he was under supervision. She could mind her own business, she thought. The next day, however, she received a call from the hospital where her mother-in-law had been taken. Neither her son nor her daughter-in-law could be contacted. Her mother-in-law had suffered a stroke. Medication and follow-up care were urgently needed. Evelyn left work, canceling a meeting. She called Robert several times, but he didn't pick up. Your mother's having a stroke. She wrote in a message, giving the number of the hospital where the woman had been taken. However, her husband didn't call back until the evening. Turns out he left his phone at home. And Vanessa did not answer calls from unknown numbers. Her mother-in-law's number in her phone was blocked. That's why Evelyn had to register her former relative in the hospital. She also went to her house to get the necessary things. She had a car. After all, the mother-in-law still lived in the neighboring village. Only in the late afternoon settled all the affairs of the hospital and explained that with her ex-husband tired woman was able to return home. Wendy's condition was not critical. She could even move around, but needed medical supervision and continued treatment. Therefore, when she was discharged from the hospital after 10 days, she could not go home. In addition, the woman needed constant care. Evelyn was visited one evening by her ex-husband. I have something very important to do with you, he said as he entered the apartment. I wonder what it is. The woman wondered. Evelyn, I left you the apartment in the divorce, didn't I? He began from afar. Yes, thank you. You did. I don't understand, but what are you getting at? The ex-wife replied. Tomorrow my mother will be discharged home. She can't go. She needs care and treatments. Oh, good. And I couldn't understand Evelyn. I'll listen and don't interrupt. Robert's getting nervous. I can't take my mother in. She and Vanessa don't get along. And we have a small child here. And Mom needs her rest. The little kid was 5 years old at the time. So I was thinking, you're still alone in a 2-bedroom apartment. Daughter's in the capital, son's at camp. Take the mother in. She's not a stranger to you, and I'll come by as needed to bring medicine and groceries. Are you serious? Evelyn looked carefully at her ex-husband. Your mother has hated and oppressed me all my life. She wouldn't let me take a step in peace, and I'm supposed to house her in my house and take care of her. Are you out of your mind? If Vanessa doesn't want your mother-in-law, put her in a nursing home. This has nothing to do with me. It was your mother who asked to come to you. Robert said quietly. He's gotten older and older all at once. She won't. She's been sitting with strangers, telling me how to trust. But if you don't mind, I'll look for a boarding house for her. She and Vanessa can't exactly live in the same house. All right, let her stay here. Evelyn suddenly agreed. She hadn't expected herself to say that. But we'll still need a nurse. I'm working to quit my job because of your mother. I'm not going to. Robert went home happy, and Evelyn wondered for a long time why she had agreed to this adventure. The next day, her ex-husband left her ex-mother-in-law with everything to try. She took over Jenna's room and took over. Wendy survived a mild stroke. She was lucky. She quickly realized something was wrong with her, and a neighbor took her to the hospital right away. That's why the effects weren't severe. Sluggish movements and slowed speech were all that gave away the illness. However, Wendy was very scared for her life, so she took the treatment more than seriously. Evelyn asked in a pitiful voice, "Bring me some water." Evelyn took a break from the computer on which she was typing another report and ran to get water for her mother-in-law. "Make me some broth." The daughter asked Wendy again, and Evelyn went to prepare the broth. During the day, the mother-in-law was cared for by a neighbor, an elderly woman, a pensioner. Her services were paid for by Robert. With her, Wendy was friendly and daughter-in-law, and the same she still tried to poke around. Now Evelyn was trying to finish all her schoolwork, didn't rush home like she used to. She had to pay all her attention to her mother-in-law. She slowly moved around the apartment, even went outside to sit on a bench. The nurse helped her with that. 2 weeks passed. John came home, and first he made a scandal because my grandmother lived in their apartment. "Why didn't she ask me?" he yelled. "It's my apartment too." "Yeah, but it's your grandmother's too." Tried to talk some sense into his mother. "I don't want her here. You're not coming back here anyway. Let her go to Papa's. There's plenty of room there." "John, but it's not forever. Grandma will get better and she'll go home." "When will that be?" "He won't put up with her here," screamed the teenager. After John grabbed his backpack and slammed the door and left, Evelyn cried and went to make dinner. The guy came back after 12. "Why are you so late?" The mother was indignant. "Leave me alone," sounded in reply, and John went to his room. The usual routine began. Evelyn was torn between her son and her mother-in-law, between home and work. Good that the neighbor helped with chores around the house, and her ex-husband groceries and medicines for his mother. Jenna called once. Her grandmother did not transfer the promised amount to her in time. She sent her granddaughter money every month. Having learned that Wendy was in trouble, the girl only sighed disappointedly. Her money was no longer to be counted on. Evelyn began to notice that there was something wrong with John. The fact that he began to be rude and snapped at home. She wrote it off on the move to their mother-in-law. However, the guy began to behave like this at school. If he used to do some homework and answer in class, now he demonstratively did not go to the blackboard when he was called. After returning from the camp, the guy did not get a single normal grade. Both teachers and students complained about him. Evelyn decided to talk to her son. As usual, he went out for a walk and came back when the family had dinner. "John, what's wrong? What's going on with you?" she asked her son. With me? What's wrong with me? The son laughed, and his eyes glistened strangely. Evelyn was suddenly afraid. She sensed something wrong. You've been rude. You've completely abandoned your studies. What do you care about studying? The child suddenly shouted angrily in a completely different tone. If I want to, I'll never go there again. John locked himself in his room, and Evelyn became even more certain that something was wrong with his son. Just what exactly was wrong with him? She didn't understand yet. She guessed, but she was afraid to admit it to herself. The next day, the woman returned early. Her son was already home. He'd gone to school. He was going outside. I'm calling one of my friends. You're not going anywhere. The mother stood on the doorstep as he was about to go out. What do you mean, I'm not going? Get out of the way. John tried to get past his mother. You're staying home tonight. Evelyn said confidently. I said back off. I have to go out. They're waiting for me, shouted the teenager, glaring angrily with his eyes. John, will you stay home? The woman repeated. Get out of here. I want to get out. The boy tried to push his mother away. His eyes were full of hatred. What are you doing? Don't you dare. They heard the voice of Wendy, who came out of her room and saw what was going on. It's your mom, she said quietly, sliding down the wall. Evelyn rushed to her and John out the door. Wendy was taken to the hospital again, but she never came out of there again. Evelyn and Robert took turns being on duty outside her room. Her son got the best medicine for his mother, but a second stroke gave her no chance of recovery. Wendy was buried in her home village. Evelyn took care of the paperwork and burial arrangements. Robert was so devastated by his mother's death that he could do nothing. He didn't seem to understand what was happening at all. Vanessa arrived only to do an audit of her mother-in-law's house. She took all the money, jewelry, and valuable things. Kolenka, I'm so sorry, she said to her husband. I have no idea what to do next. Let Evelyn handle it. She'll do a better job. Funerals are very scary for me. I can't do it. Evelyn didn't refuse. She decided she was doing it in memory of her ex-mother-in-law. She felt guilty, and in her death. There were many people at the farewell ceremony. Wendy was buried in her home township, so colleagues, acquaintances, and neighbors also came. And there were quite a few of them. There were long eulogies and tears. Jenna didn't come to the funeral. Mom, I have so much work to do right now, she said on the phone. I'm sorry about Grandma, but there's nothing I can do to help her. How did we raise such a selfish person? Evelyn thought. However, she had no time to think. She had to deal with the immediate problems. John came to the funeral. He came along with his mother. The boy sat in a small room where people rarely came in and looked moodily out the window. After the burial ceremony, he approached his mother. I can't stand it here any longer, he said. Give me some money. I'm going home. Evelyn did not argue. There was neither strength nor desire. Silently, she handed her son the money for the fare. He left. After the ceremony, Evelyn was approached by a former classmate. They used to be friends. How are you? Molly asked. I'm okay. It's just sad. It's like we weren't. I've never been close to my mother-in-law. It's a shame she's so stupid. Evelyn had a heart-to-heart with her friend about what had caused Wendy's second stroke. Don't worry, Molly reassured her. It's not that the stroke was caused by that. Maybe it just happened. But take a good look at your son. What do you mean? Evelyn was worried. You know, I've been working in a drug dispensary for a long time, and I've seen all sorts of things. So the woman looked at her friend carefully. John's demeanor and appearance raised certain concerns. Talk to her about what was wrong. Evelyn began to get nervous. Have you noticed from what point his behavior has changed? Molly asked. Ever since he came back from camp, I wanted him to change his social circle. So he did. Now he's got these weird friends. Most of them older than him. I wouldn't even recognize any of them. They look the same to me, skinny, long, wearing some kind of hoodie, and their hoods are pulled up. You can see their eyes. Every night John goes out with them now. Where to? Why? He doesn't tell me anything. How has he changed? A friend asked me. Nervous, secretive. Anything yells at the door of his room, and a lock cut out my personal space. He comes home late. He doesn't go to school very often. And I've got exams in a month. And he's got this weird glint in his eye. And Evelyn sighed angrily. I don't want to upset you, she said quietly, but what you've told me, plus your son's appearance. He's sullen, with bruises under his eyes, an unhealthy glint in his eyes, and irritability. These are not disappointing signs. Are you saying he's a drug addict? Evelyn finally uttered the dreaded word that had been rolling around in her head for a long time. You watch him. Molly still avoided a direct answer. In case of anything, call me, and we'll think of something. Evelyn stayed at her mother-in-law's apartment for a few more days. She cleaned up, put her papers in order. Here, quiet and alone. She thought back to the time when she lived with Robert and his mother. For some reason, only good things came to mind. She thought of her son. He didn't answer the phone. He didn't answer her messages. Was it true? Evelyn thought with horror. A few days later, Robert asked her to go with him to the notary about Wendy's will. It turned out that the woman had divided her property between her son and eldest granddaughter. The cottage and her father's old car were left to the grandson, and the apartment to Jenna. The grandmother loved her granddaughter very much. Evelyn came home. John was gone. The apartment was a complete mess. Things strewn about, dishes not washed in her room, the contents of her desk drawers turned out on the floor. The guy was obviously looking for something. The money the woman left for utility bills was gone. Good thing Evelyn kept her savings in a safe at work. Otherwise, they'd be gone too. The woman dialed her son, but he, as usual, did not answer. Wrote a message. He's alive. Last time his mother called all his friends and acquaintances. He probably didn't want it to happen again. John returned, 2 days later, dirty, exhausted, and hungry. He silently poured himself a bowl of borscht and went to his room. John, let's talk. Knocked on the door. Evelyn has nothing to talk about. There was a reply from behind the door. Maybe about the money you took. There was silence in response. John barely finished 9th grade. The only reason he got C's was because his mother was the vice principal. How many times did Evelyn try to talk to her son? He wouldn't respond to anything. He'd leave the house on any pretext. When she tried to stop him, he just pushed her away. Then things started going missing. First, Evelyn couldn't find her gold chain. She wanted to wear it to the 11th grade prom, but couldn't find it. Figured she put it somewhere else. 2 weeks later, a ring the woman remembered was missing. She took it off and put it in her jewelry box. The day before, John, have you seen my ring? She asked her son at breakfast. What ring? The indifferent one. He questioned the gold one with the yellow stone. Dad, my father gave it to me. You're gonna say I stole it again. Suddenly, the boy started yelling. What do I need it for? I didn't see anything. John jumped up from the table. A teacup fell to the floor and shattered into shards, as my life for some reason thought Evelyn. Give me the money. My son turned around on the way out. I don't have any money, calmly answered the mother. And then you're surprised that your rings are missing. He hissed angrily as he left. Evelyn understood what was happening to her son, but she didn't want to believe it. She decided to check on him again. I bought some quality costume jewelry and a gold ring at a nearby store. A layman couldn't tell the difference. Even the hallmarks are on the case. Even my son noticed. What do you have? Asked, nodding at the rags colleagues at work on the anniversary of the money given. Here added, and bought a new ring instead of the one I lost. Innocently, she answered carefully, looking at her son. Gold only, and he asked. Of course, I don't wear costume jewelry. Evelyn was allergic to precious metals, so she only wore gold and silver. The kids knew that. And you complain about not having any money. The teenager gritted his teeth. Before going to bed, Evelyn removed the ring and left it in the bathroom. Like mine, and took it off. Forgot to put it back on. In the morning, The ring was not there. In the evening, the son came back, angry. "Give me money." He turned to the mother of the money. "You took my ring. You don't have enough." She asked him head on. "Your ring is bullshit. There's no gold in it, not even clothes. You got screwed." The guy laughed. "I know, I bought it at the store next door for $2.50. Evelyn smiled back. "What? How dare you?" John yelled and lunged at her with his fists. That's when the son hit his mother for the first time. Late that night, Evelyn called Molly and in tears told her what had happened. The friend said she would think about what could be done. In the morning, she called to see if John was home. He was asleep. He came back in the morning. He had gone to shake out his mother's purse. There was still some change in there. Evelyn was used to hiding money from her son. An hour later, an ambulance came for John. The friend brought the documents, signing which Evelyn agreed on behalf of her son to compulsory treatment in a drug dispensary. There was no other option. When John was taken out by the orderlies, he was screaming and crying, promising that he would never do it again. He fell to his knees and begged for one last chance. Evelyn cried, "Don't listen to him." Her friend reassured her, "Only treatment can help him. He's just a child." John was taken away. Evelyn cried all day. Her friend called and told her everything was fine. How was that possible in this situation? The boy was placed in a private room. He was given good care and constant monitoring. "You did the right thing." Molly said it again. But that didn't make Evelyn feel any better. The woman wandered around the empty apartment and could not understand when her favorite son became a drug addict. What had happened to them all? The boy was facing a long treatment and a long rehabilitation. He was not allowed to talk on the phone, receive visitors, or otherwise contact the outside world. By then, Jenna had inherited the estate. The girl even came all the way from Moscow for that. Money for her has always been in the first place. The girl entered the mother's house and looked around squeamishly. "And you haven't done any repairs here since I left?" Camille asked. "No, I haven't had time for that," Evelyn replied, looking at her changed daughter. Camille hadn't been home in years. Jenna looked gorgeous. Expensive, delirious clothes, manicure, hairstyle, makeup. Everything spoke of the girl's high standard of living. "So you work?" the mother asked. "Of course, as an accountant in a very good firm," smiling, replied the daughter. "It is necessary to look accordingly. Here I have to invest a lot in myself. And now I want to buy an apartment. I'm tired of paying such sums for rented accommodation. Apartments in Moscow are expensive," my mother said. "Yes, not cheap," hummed Jenna. "Grandma's inheritance will come in handy. I'll sell her apartment. I think you can get a good sum for her 2 apartments here. Besides, it's not a bad neighborhood. And I'll leave all the furniture in the apartment. Come and live, as they say. But it's not enough for an apartment in Moscow." The girl grimaced. "Jenna, you work. Take a mortgage," her mother advised. "That'll be enough." "Yeah, and live 10 years in debt." Jenna smiled wryly. "I've been thinking about this," she continued to father. "After all, he left us the apartment in 3 equal shares, right?" My mother agreed, not yet realizing what the catch was. "I think we should sell it and divide the money into 3 equal parts. I'll take mine. That way I'll have enough for the apartment." "Wait, where are we going to live with John?" Evelyn was surprised. "And you'll buy your own place with your 2 parts. It's only fair." Jenna was sure she was right. "Daughter, but we won't be able to buy a proper apartment with the money we have left. We have a 2-bedroom apartment. If we sell it and give you your part of it, the money we get won't be enough for a 2-room apartment. Then we can't buy a 1-room apartment." "I don't care," Jenna said. "I'm entitled to my share, and I'm not going to miss this chance." Although she turned to her mother. "If you have any savings, you can give me the money for my share. Then I won't have to sell the apartment. And get Grandma's junk out of my room, please." Jenna shoved Wendy's bag with the rest of her things with her foot. "I'll have to stay here for a few days." Evelyn didn't know what she should do. On the one hand, she didn't have any savings, but she didn't want to sell the apartment either. She needed a place to live with John. And Jenna's brothers hadn't even asked her anything. Suddenly, the woman thought. She decided to go see her son. Maybe they'd let her see him. A friend led her to the ward. "Just a few minutes," she said, "and please don't get emotional. Keep your cool." John was alone in a small room. There was a bed, a nightstand, and even a TV on the wall. The boy was lying with his back turned to the wall. "John," son called Evelyn. The boy lifted his head up. "Mom." Joyfully he exclaimed, "You came for me. I knew you wouldn't leave me here." "John, wait, I didn't come for you. I came to check on you," said the woman. "Check up on me how? Can't you see I'm not doing well here? You sent me here on purpose to keep me out of your way." The guy's eyes were spitting anger. "Get me out of here, please." Suddenly he sobbed, falling to his knees and hugging her legs. "I'll never get stoned ever again. Or give me money." He looked at her with crazed eyes. John was pale, blue circles under his eyes. His hands trembled nervously. There was an unhealthy glint in his eyes. Evelyn ran out the door. I hate you," shouted the guy, and pounded his fists on the door. The orderlies arrived. Injecting sedatives, the noises outside the door subsided. "I told you, it's too early to visit him," softly reproached her friend. "Come to my place. There is a conversation," she said. Evelyn turned to her Molly, as she had long ago, in school time. "Do you know how your son got hooked on all this?" Molly asked. "I don't. I can only guess that at camp," the woman replied quietly. "Yes, he talked to our psychologist. For a long time did not want to make contact, but then he told me. There was just such a shift for children from not very well-off families. A couple of guys with social habits, I guess. What about John? He's looking for himself. He's a very complicated guy. Yeah, he's always wanted extreme sports and easy money. New experiences. Sad," agreed Evelyn. "Well, you're looking for excitement," Molly said. "He shared a room with these guys. They got him hooked on drugs in 3 weeks. Not so much that he got hooked, but he just liked it. Turns out these guys are also from your village and go to school in your neighborhood. So after he got back, things continued." Evelyn cried quietly, wiping her tears with her hand. "Can this be cured?" she asked. Quietly, honestly. Her friend looked at her sadly. "Very difficult. John doesn't want to change anything, doesn't see the problem. And that's where the result depends on. But don't give up hope. We're not losing hope. And I would also advise you to change your place of residence. If he returns to his surroundings, everything will definitely happen again." Evelyn now knew what to do. After leaving Molly's, she dialed Jenna. "Daughter, I'm willing to sell the apartment and give all the money to you, and you give me and John Grandma's 2-bedroom, she said. "But it's not an equal exchange." Jenna didn't hold back. "Our apartment is in a good neighborhood, in a new building, and our village is more developed. Real estate prices here are much higher than in Baburinum Zarekni. It's better for you to sell our apartment and buy another one with the money. In Zeriki, you can even buy a 3-bedroom in an old house. As much as I didn't like money, I tried to be honest with my mother and explain her lack of practicality. Do you agree or not? It's my decision. If it is, of course it is. I remain in the plus." The girl was happy. The paperwork was finalized quickly. Evelyn's apartment was also sold quickly. The woman began to settle down in a new place. She even found a job in the local school as a math teacher who had just gone on maternity leave. She never went to see her son again. A friend told me about the progress of his treatment, said John was on the mend. Jenna bought a small apartment in Moscow. On the outskirts, of course, not in the best neighborhood, but it was her own. She called her mother even less often. She couldn't send money now. And the inheritance had already been received and divided. Her father also refused to help Miranda on a permanent basis. "Listen, daughter, you're working. You've already got a place to live. It's time to take care of yourself. They'll give you some money for the holidays from time to time, of course. But you can't expect monthly payments from me. I have a family of my own, a kid to take care of. So no offense, he said to his daughter when she once again called with complaints. Why didn't he give her a dime in October? John was discharged in November. Instead of a confident, cocky guy, Evelyn saw a teenager with a blank stare. For a long time, John was still coming to grips with the 10th grade program. The young man was learning at home. Homeschooling was arranged by Evelyn at his school. Day after day passed. John gradually chewed up. A psychologist worked with the boy. He studied with tutors. Within a year, he caught up with the program, started preparing for the US. But he had no friends, and John only left the house when he had to. Evelyn thought better of it that way. The woman herself worked quietly in the new school. She perfectly integrated into the team, continued to communicate with Molly, her old friend. Now they lived not far from each other. They could see each other sometimes and communicate. Molly also lived alone. She was divorced from her husband. Her children had grown up and moved to other cities, so the women shared their loneliness with each other. Meanwhile, John finished 11th grade and passed the US. Passed so that even surprised himself. He entered the university he wanted on a budget. John went to a neighboring city to study, and Evelyn was left alone in an empty apartment. From time to time, the son called and told briefly about his life. Less often, the mother came more often. Sometimes, and the father transferred money, the guy on the card. 2 years passed like that. In the 3rd year, I decided to get a part-time job. He didn't have enough money. He wanted to live without denying himself anything. His mother didn't have that much money. My father didn't give me much either. No matter how much Evelyn discouraged her son, he got a job as a bartender in a nightclub. As they say, there's no escaping fate. Her son's phone calls were much less frequent. Busy all the time, she heard his mother on the phone. She also heard familiar intonations, but she didn't want to believe the worst until the last moment. After the summer session, Evelyn received a notice from the institute that John was expelled for truancy and for tales. He had failed the session. He didn't pick up the phone. He hasn't called for a long time either, sometimes only sending familiar messages. He's alive. He's fine. Evelyn told Molly everything. She just shook her head. Probably snapped, she said regretfully. Nightclubs often sell that kind of crap. That's probably where John got hooked on it again. Can you help him? My friend asked hopefully. I don't think so. He doesn't want to be treated. Maybe that's why he didn't last long. The treatment will have less effect each time. I'm sorry, she said quietly. What do we do now? Evelyn asked. Wait until he wants to go back to normal, and then we can help him. And if he doesn't? Evelyn cried. Let's hope for the best. Her friend tried to reassure her. The woman decided to go to see her son. However, when she arrived at John's dormitory, she did not find him there. He had not paid for the room for a long time and did not appear here. Where is he? No one knew. At the club where he worked, he wasn't there either. Fired. The new bartender answered his mother's question with irritation. I still owed money from the cash register, but I forgot to put it back. So my mother came home with nothing. John never called. He showed up 6 months later. Dirty, ragged, thin, and angry John. Mother rushed to him. Give her some money. Threw her son from the threshold. But I have no money, answered his mother. Let's talk. I can help you. The son pushed her away and walked into the apartment. First, he was shaken by the mother's purse, then her jewelry box. Don't you dare, the mother rushed toward him. However, he pushed her away so that the woman fell to the floor, took John and the laptop on which Evelyn was working. See you later, he said, turning around at the threshold. I'll be back in a month, and the money. Evelyn was left sitting on the floor, shedding tears. Her beloved youngest son had turned into a monster. We need to call the police, Molly said in response to her story. I've worked with this kind of thing all my life. I'm sorry, but he's beyond help. Molly, what police? He's my son. Do you want him to kill you in a month? Or do you plan on giving him everything you have? He's my son. Maybe he'll understand me. Maybe he'll hear me. You're the one who said he needs help. Evelyn looked at her friend with hope. He's a junkie. He won't understand. Molly shook her head sadly. The month passed like a dream. Evelyn promised her friend that she would call her if there was anything wrong. However, John did not show up after a month, nor did he show up 2 months later. Then he suddenly came again, opening the door of the apartment with his own key. Outwardly, the guy hadn't changed much since the last time they'd seen each other. Only the shadows under his eyes were deeper. Yes, the clothes were more worn. You could tell they hadn't been washed in a while. "Son, why don't you eat?" Evelyn asked. The first thing that came to mind. "I've got the money ready." The boy smiled unkindly and said, "Where did I get the money?" The woman said quietly, "I don't know. You always save for a rainy day." "Well, it's already come." John laughed. "Where's the money?" He came close to the mother, and she suddenly realized that he had nothing to lose. The man punched her in the face. She fell from the house. He was leaving with all of Evelyn's savings, and also with her phone and wedding ring. He didn't find it last time. It was in the cupboard. The guy also took the new linens. This happened a few more times. John gradually took everything he could get out of the apartment. Sometimes he beat his mother, and sometimes he cried and apologized, crawling on his knees. This was what kept Evelyn from calling the police. Each time, Evelyn promised Molly that she would be sure to call the police next time, but she never did. In the last year, Evelyn had aged 10 years at once. No one would give her 55 now. She looked 70. The woman sat there, dried up. "Evelyn, if you don't call the police, I'll do it myself," Molly said, arriving at her friend's house after her regular meeting with her son. "Not only did he take everything out of the house, but you're not even alive anymore." "Well," answered Evelyn, "I'll come to my senses, and then we'll go." A couple of days later, however, her daughter from the capital unexpectedly came to see her. The girl still as squeamishly walked through the apartment. She said through gritted teeth, "Mom, have you sold the car yet?" She asked. "No." "Why?" The woman asked. "I need money. I can't pay the loan." The daughter said, "What about a job? A steady income? I thought you said you were doing well." "I was fired from my job." The daughter didn't go into details. "What about the car?" "Leave me alone. I've already made you cry." A woman. On emotion, she told her daughter that Jenna last year does not give her life. "That's just the way things are," Jenna said thoughtfully. "I'll probably stay with you for a while." The girl said, thinking about something, "Don't go to the police yet. You'll get there. He's your son, not some bandit." After that, Jenna often disappeared from home. Evelyn never went to the police. One day, when she came home early, the woman found her daughter born with the papers. She had spread them out on the couch and was studying them, making notes in a notebook. "What are you doing?" Evelyn asked. She saw among the papers the documents for the car and the apartment. "I'm making sure your papers are in order." "I don't know what's going on," said her daughter, not at all embarrassed. "There's no chance of that," repeated the mother. "Never mind," smiled the daughter. But something in that smile Evelyn did not like. A few days later, in the morning, when the mother and daughter were still asleep, John appeared. He looked animated, saying hello to Jenna. It seemed to the mother that he was not at all surprised to see his sister here. "Sign." The boy handed the mother some papers. "What are these?" the woman asked. She looked at the documents and froze. In front of her was a gift deed for an apartment and a power of attorney for a car. The only thing missing on the papers was her signature. "I won't sign it," she said. "You will." Angry, smiled and punched her mother in the face. "You don't have to kill her, but you have to sign it on paper." Jenna spoke up. "So you know." The woman quietly turned to her daughter. "I was the mastermind. the daughter boasted. "You'd better sign everything so you don't suffer," the girl said almost sympathetically. Evelyn signed the documents. Jonah was able to force her to do so. Outside the window it was beginning to matchmake. Make it 3. And that car from Marish handed her Jenna's rag. "What car?" asked, not understanding the woman. My daughter laughed. "Get ready," muttered the son. "We're leaving for a little trip." "No, please don't. I'll just leave," cried the mother. No one listened to her, however. Jenna threw her an old down jacket for the day. Like walking in the woods, fell, passed out and froze with a wicked smile. She pronounced. John started the car. They drove in silence. The forest appeared ahead. "You're really going to leave me here?" the mother said in a low voice. "Yes, I need money," he answered simply. "But you are my son. I gave birth to you and raised you. I've been with you and supported you always." Tears flowed from the woman's eyes. "Don't you feel sorry for your own mother? You took everything away from me. I signed the deed to the apartment. Let me out." "I'll let you out," John laughed. "I don't feel sorry for anybody." "Well, you don't want to know." The boy glared unkindly. "Don't worry, it won't hurt. Come on out. We're here," he said, stopping the car at the entrance to the forest. "John, please, listen to me. I'm your mother. Let me go. Take the apartment and the car. I just want to live." An old woman was crying. No, Jenna warned me this would happen. You cry here now, and then you go straight to the police. She's the one who talked you out of it. You would have turned me in a long time ago." "Come out," he said. Evelyn took the snow slowly through the woods, dusting her boots, but she didn't notice it. Behind her, her son was walking, her little favorite boy, the one she had always pitied and tried to protect from an unjust world. He was coming to kill her. "It won't hurt," John repeated in a drug-induced delirium, and hit his mother over the head with a stick he'd found in the woods. Evelyn fell into oblivion. Abandoned in the cold by her children, the beaten old woman moaned throughout the forest, attracting hungry animals. Suddenly, she heard someone creeping toward her through the snowdrifts. John came back. "He couldn't leave me." She fought through the fog. But a complete stranger was leaning over her. Already on the way, the woman recognized the girl. She remembered her as a girl. Her parents had lived next door to Evelyn's mother-in-law at the time when she had lived there with her husband. Stephen took Evelyn to the hospital. The police were immediately called there. Stephen and Camille told them that they had found the old woman in the woods, although she was not an old woman, only 56 years old. Evelyn did not want to testify against her own children, but she had no other choice. They didn't just want to leave her homeless. They were trying to kill her. Camille called Molly. Evelyn knew her number by heart. The woman came right over. "Evelyn." She rushed to Evelyn. "Oh my God, what is it?" Tears were streaming down the woman's cheeks. She looked at Hidding's battered head friend and cried. "I told you, let's go to the police." "And you?" "The daughter came. She won't let me." "Do you realize Jenna knew?" She didn't interrupt quietly. The woman said. "She didn't just know. She organized the whole thing." The investigator said, walking into the room. How she organized it, Evelyn didn't understand. Just the idea to take away all your property belongs to her. She told me everything. Tried to blame it on John, but he also confessed. "But she works. She has an apartment in Moscow." Evelyn said quietly. "She doesn't work anywhere. She was caught up in financial fraud and got a ticket out of work. Couldn't pay the mortgage on the apartment." "What mortgage?" "She has her own apartment." The woman insisted. "No, she doesn't. She sold hers and got a bigger one. A fancy one. She had a rich lover. Promised to help with the mortgage. Yeah, too greedy. Your daughter decided to break up his family. Sam, I wrote that they have a daughter. I sent a picture. The guy turned out to be a family man. Dumped Jenna. He gave up his daughter. And his wife forgave him. So your daughter was left in debt, like in silk, and with an unwanted child in her arms." She came to you for money. She thought she'd at least sell your car. She's going abroad. But it's my car." Evelyn was surprised. Yes, she was counting on both jewelry and money. "What have you been saving?" "I didn't realize John had already taken it all out. When I found out, I was very upset. Then, you were the one who told her about John showing up again. She got the idea for the apartment. She found her brother herself through some old friends of his. She arranged everything with them, found a corrupt notary who helped her draw up the deeds in her name. She promised her brother half after the sale. Of course she wouldn't do that. Would have put John away as soon as they found you frozen in the woods. Jenna's already made up a legend. How John came to you, locked her in a room, and took her mother away to some unknown destination, while she was able to free herself, while she waited for her mother. That's how it would have happened if kind people hadn't found you." "Wait a minute. I just remembered something. Evelyn, you said she had a daughter, but she never told me." "The girl's about 2 years old. She's in quarantine at the orphanage right now. Her daughter turned her in personally when she realized she couldn't get money from her lover through the baby." A native daughter in an orphanage. The woman could not utter another word. Tears rolled from her classroom. Evelyn was crying. "How did I raise such children? What did I do wrong?" she asked Molly. "I didn't know what to say to my friend." Stephen and Camille came to see Evelyn. They brought the woman fruit and asked what else they could do to help. The woman thanked them. They treated her better than her own children. Camille handed Evelyn a drawing with the inscription, "Dear Grandma Evelyn." The woman cried again. Somewhere out there in the Moscow orphanage her own granddaughter was now in. There was a knock on the ward. Robert stood on the threshold. He approached his ex-wife and sat down beside her on the table. "Why didn't you tell me about John?" he asked. "I could have solved everything." "I didn't want to bother you," the woman replied quietly. "We've missed something," Robert said. "I blame you. I've been away all the time. Work, worries. The children grew up without a father. So that's how it turned out. Lucky's doing the right thing now. Every evening, she asks me to do with my son. Then I teach him lessons, then play board games. We all play together. Yes, she turned out to be wiser than me. And I'm a teacher," Evelyn said sadly. "By the way, she said hello to you." Robert pulled out a pie carefully wrapped in white towels. "Did Vanessa bake this for you?" The woman was surprised. "I thought she didn't cook. Now everything has changed. She cooks and takes care of her son, and now she is almost a perfect hostess and mother," said her ex-husband proudly. "What can I do for you?" he asked. "Really? You can," mysteriously answered Evelyn, and began to tell her husband the story she had heard from the investigator. "Get well," Robert said quietly, saying goodbye. "And forgive me," he repeated. "I'll try to help you." Evelyn recovered surprisingly quickly and was discharged home. John and Jenna were on trial. The daughter was jailed for 8 years and the son for 15. He, as it turned out, had a large baggage of committed crimes. The mother listened to the verdict calmly. She understood that the crime must be punished. She was allowed to see her daughter before the trial. "Mommy," she cried. If Evelyn had not known the truth, she would have believed her sincerity. "It's all John. It's all he made up. He threatened me. I didn't want to. I know everything." The woman replied quietly but firmly. "You wanted to set him up, didn't you?" Jenna's tears dried immediately. "You could have just sold the car and given me the money," she said angrily. "What about your daughter?" Evelyn asked. "I wrote a waiver." "What do I need her for?" "Just trouble. She was with the nanny all the time anyway, while Sam was paying, and I refused to pay. As soon as my wife got here, I was gonna dump her." Jenna laughed. "I am very ashamed that you are my daughter," said the woman quietly. "I'm sorry, of course, but I won't come to you. And don't expect any transfers either. But you are my mother. You must help me," said Jenna. "That's okay. It's true that you tried to kill me with irony and self-surprise," replied Evelyn, walked away from her daughter. She was almost relieved. All the dots were almost all dotted. You must come with me, asked Evelyn to her friend. When were all the formalities of the papers settled? In the month that passed after her discharge from the hospital, the woman had changed a lot. And from a wrinkle and an old woman, she began to turn into a youthful older woman again. And most importantly, she calmed down and came to her senses and went back to work. Now the woman found meaning in life again. Of course, dear, replied the friend. How can I leave you at a time like this? The road to Moscow was not close, but Evelyn felt confident behind the wheel. She had been driving for a long time. The only thing was that it took a long time to wake up through the Moscow streets. Here, the navigator came to the rescue. The women also drove up to one of the baby houses. Evelyn sat in the car, gripping the steering wheel tightly. Evelyn, have you changed your mind? Asked my friend. Have you? No, of course not, she replied. It's just such a responsibility. I love her already. This is my granddaughter, my daughter. You and I have already come here 3 times. I'm afraid not to repeat the mistakes in bringing up children. I still don't understand what I missed, where I went wrong. After all, I love them and was strict in moderation. That's how it is philosophically, said a friend. Sometimes even in normal families grow up such children less often. Normal kids in dysfunctional families. But things happen. You shouldn't blame yourself. You have to try not to make the same mistakes in the future. And without you, this baby has no future. Your daughter doesn't need her. It's not for nothing that she wrote a refusal. The father, as I understand it too. The girl isn't even registered to him. You're all she's got left. Yeah. And I only got her. And you, of course. Evelyn smiled at her friend. It's amazing how many good people there are around. Stephen and Camille see me off every week. My ex-husband hired a team of builders, and while I was in the hospital, they completely renovated the apartment. He didn't tell me. I came back, and the apartment was someone else's, and the furniture was modern, new, not mine. I only realized from the things in the closet that she bought me new pots and pans. They're good people after all. What did she always tell you? What are you like? And the people around you. How you treat people is how they treat you. Yeah. It just didn't work with my kids. Bitterly, sighed Evelyn. But it happens. Let's go already, friend, because the granddaughter waited for you. The teacher was just dressing Kalinka. The woman called her, driving up. The girl's things were already packed. Seeing her grandmother, the girl smiled happily and stretched out her hands to her. Lucky little girl smiled at the teacher. Recently only got to us and has already found her home. I was surprised when she was brought to us. A young, beautiful woman in a luxury car, and such a cruel Olechka cried so much, so called for her. I still have her mommy in my ears, when we literally held her away from your daughter, and she didn't care. Not a shred of pity. Sign what? Is she talking? I'm in a hurry. Our superintendent asked her if she felt sorry for her own daughter. She said it was a pity she'd given birth to her in the first place. She never visited her daughter again. Evelyn asked quietly, "What do you mean?" She made a waiver right away. She brought the baby's things, said she didn't need them anymore. We asked about the girl's father. She gave us a number. Did you contact him? The woman asked. Of course we did. But he didn't want to talk to us. Said he was taking a DNA test. And as it turned out, Jenna wanted to pin someone else's baby on him, so he had nothing to do with the girl. The man wasn't surprised the baby ended up in an orphanage. Said Jenna only wanted the girl as a way to get money out of him. And as long as he was sure that his daughter he paid correctly. By the way, the man transferred a considerable sum to the account of our institution, said that he was sorry, but the girl will be better here than with such a mother. I didn't want to believe that my daughter was capable of that. But after everything, I'm not surprised anymore. Evelyn said, "Here is our beauty and ready," said the teacher to button up the girl's overalls. "I wish you happiness. I think everything will be fine now." Evelyn hugged her granddaughter, and she trustingly clung to her and smiled a naive, childish smile, so sincere and full of selfless love that the woman's heart squeezed. Only children know how to love truly, not for something, but just because you are. When they returned home, they found a real holiday in Evelyn's apartment. There were balloons hanging everywhere and garlands on the baby's crib, which, by the way, had not been there before. There was a huge polar bear and some dolls. In the room were playing Robert's son and Vanessa and Camille. The women themselves were busy setting the table in the kitchen. Robert was trying to screw the extra wheels onto the children's bicycle and cursing unkindly because the wrench kept slipping and the bolts wouldn't fit. Stephen held the bike and tried to help with advice. Christopher smiled indulgently as he watched the men. "Honey, please." It's not the first time Vanessa looked out of the kitchen. "They're back. That's to everyone here. Gifts, hugs, and congratulations, holiday feasting and merriment." All of this was new to Ring. She clung tightly to Evelyn's hand and didn't let go until she was interested in the toys in the nursery. In half an hour, she was already playing merrily there with Camille, who gladly took charge of her. The adults gathered around the festive table. At last, all the difficulties were behind them. Evelyn looked lovingly at the family faces. "Sometimes," she said, raising her glass with her relatives, "and the real loved ones are not those who are their birthright, but those who give you a chance to start a new life. Thank you, my dearest, most beloved people. Without you, I could not have survived this terrible time for me. Now I know that the most valuable thing is the people who care about you." Outside the window, it snowed for a long time, covering the snow-white blanket, all the bad things that happened before. And I propose to everyone to start a new life with a clean, white, snowy sheet.
Subscribe and click the bell.
The Corver family was not starstruck, but they were not poor either. It was an average intellectual family. The head of the family, Nick Corver, worked as a math teacher at school. His wife, Sophia, worked in the village administration. Corver had a daughter, Helen. They would have been happy to give the girl a brother or sister, but the state of health did not allow Sophia to become a mother. The second time, they lived amicably. In the summer, they went to the mountains, to the lake, or campgrounds as a family. And in the cold time, Corver loved to arrange family gatherings together, cooked hot pastries, or own or captive bags under fragrant aromatic tea. All remarks to each other, if any, sounded not at all offensive and were taken rather as jokes. Unlike many teenagers, Helen Corver had only heard firsthand what strained family relationships and parental misunderstandings were like. Whatever happened to her, Helen could always trust her parents and count on their help. In the family reigned love, understanding, and mutual respect. If there was something that marred the happiness of the family, it was the relationship between Nick and his mother-in-law. The situation is anecdotal, except he wouldn't be laughing. Dear Wendy apparently considered it her duty almost every day to visit them and give valuable instructions, or rather to poke her nose into everything in her field of vision. "Why is your porch wobbling?" Looking disapprovingly in the direction of her son-in-law, Wendy said, "What are you in the house for, man? It's like this every time. That the beds are not to dig, that the grass is low, that here to catch a cold." A separate topic was the closet of my wife and daughter. A real man should dress up his women. My mother-in-law insisted. When Sophia saw a beautiful dress on TV and said she wanted the same Nick. "Well, right, honestly, what do you have them wearing?" Helen looked at her tracksuit and shrugged her shoulders. It didn't escape Grandma's eyes. "You're going someplace decent, or else there's nothing to do." Solemnly, Wendy summed it up. "Mom, what do you mean by a decent place?" Sophia grinned. "A theater or a restaurant? We don't go to them." "You should." "Oh, and what though?" "Not in a tracksuit." Sophia is tempted to reply that she and her late father were not regulars at such places either, but she changes her mind. After all, Mom is Mom, and she wants her daughter to have everything she needs for a happy life. And thank God that Nick preferred to keep his mouth shut, for he didn't like conflict. Nick Corver really did not like conflicts, but adored his girls. For their sake, Corver was ready to endure anyone, including squabbling and restless mother-in-law and soft character of Nick Konstantinovich. His relatives noticed it, shook their heads, and expressed their discontent. "Yes, she's just riding you," said Betty, Nick's sister. "Mark my word, it won't end well," and she was right. It all started with Sophia's promotion. Years ago, Sophia, a college graduate, joined the local government. Simply put, she got a job as a secretary. Then she was lucky. The previous secretary was just going on maternity leave. After the position of secretary was removed from the staff schedule, Sophia was not left without a job. She became a specialist and finally reached the position of vice chairman. Her duties have increased, but also the salary became higher. And that's what prompted a new round of attacks. Wendy on Nick, on the occasion of his wife's promotion. And to you, they slaughtered a boar. The women prepared dinner, and after a shower, Corver and their relatives gathered at a generously set table. Alas, at first hearty sit-downs with the easy hand of Wendy turned into a real balaganza. During the family feast, the elderly woman drank too much and she, as they call it, was carried away. "Shame on you," she said. "A woman and like a damned and earns, by the way, more than you." Mom warned me before Sophia started that, "Mom, I'm telling the truth. Can't we deal with this truth on our own? They'll figure it out." "Nick, do you really like your job?" "I like it," my son-in-law answered briefly. "But I like it even more when my wife earns good money." The truth, Wendy continued to stir things up. "God," exclaimed Helen, and grabbed not a single piece of meat pie and a glass of tea, went to her room. "But what's rather reproachful?" Sophia asked her mother. "By the way, Scarlett has a scarlet transitional age, and the girl very painfully perceives you." She could not find the right words and only waved her hand. If there were another person in Wendy's place, he would have realized that he had just spoiled a peaceful family holiday and hurried to smooth over the conflict. But where was it? Strong alcohol plus a quarrelsome temper. A mixture of thermonuclear girl and scandalized. And let the girl know that her daddy is a worthless man. And what makes him worthless, I wonder. Betty obeyed, who didn't mind what she said. She organically did not like her brother's mother-in-law. And the relatives suspected that the fighting woman was just waiting to have a heart-to-heart fight with Wendy. Those present froze in anticipation of not a weak performance, and were not at all deceived in their expectations. The women screamed so loud that the dishes rang. "Your brother is a shit and a lowlife," Wendy said. "Yes, my brother is a good man," contended Betty belligerently. "But you're an old schemer for your own life?" "No, you're a meddler in other people's." "What did you say?" Sophia formidably asked the relative, looming over the sister of her hated brother-in-law. But the young woman from the preamble aside and nonchalantly replied that they had heard. Live themselves to live amicably, bring up a daughter, and persuaded Betty. But no, even on a holiday, there's no peace from you. "Mom, but really," my son Alexander intervened. "You were sitting so well, weren't you?" "Eggs. Chicken is very thoughtful," threatened mother, and then came to the table, defiantly poured herself a full shot glass of vodka and drank. Didn't blush. "Come on. Zatsatsatsia for this is not to give." She continued savoring the crunch of the pickle. Everyone, as one, just sighed heavily. If Wendy Medvedeva had been on her own for a long time. But why does Grandma always cling to Daddy for the umpteenth time? Helen wondered. She, of course, was still quite young, and due to the lack of life experience, still understood little. But she knew one thing about a husband like Nick. They are still to be found. He doesn't drink, helps his mother with the household chores, earns money. What else do you need? The girls sighed heavily. Voices, related from the hall, could not. Actually, it was mostly Wendy's grandmother who spoke. The others did not dare to try to contradict her, but it seems, unsuccessfully. All in all, fun, and so it was every holiday. The pork pie was getting cold and didn't look so appetizing, and I didn't feel like eating. And why do we have everything not like people? Helen thought, we're getting there. And the tea, which also began to cool down. This year, Corver's only daughter was finishing school. She had dreamed of becoming a journalist since 5th grade, and was eagerly counting the days until graduation. And then Helen would go to university to study and work as a journalist. The girl imagined interviewing a celebrity. Her heart closed sweetly. God, but why do universities have to study for 5 whole years with a sigh? Helen thought, that's such a long time. She desperately wanted to go to another world where everything is beautiful, cultured, and there are no table scandals. To hell with all of you. Helen heard her grandmother's loud voice and shuddered. Don't listen to me, but in vain. After a while, the voices fell silent. A fuss was heard, and the girl realized with relief that the guests were leaving. When the house was quiet, Helen came out of her room. Her father was sitting in an armchair, obviously thinking hard about something. Don't be mad at Mom, Sophia said, picking up the plates from the table. I'm not. Nick shrugged and sighed, adding, I'm used to it. He looked so lost that Helen wanted to hug her father and say something nice to him, and what, in fact, prevented it. The girl came to Nick and, sitting on the windowsill of the chair, hugged him by the neck. Daddy, I love you very much. With tenderness, said Helen, and added, and you, Mom. I have the coolest parents in the world. Well, we are glad to hear that, Sophia smiled. But to make my joy complete, help me clear the table serving comrade-in-chief, replied the daughter, jokingly saluted. At that moment, all 3 of them were thinking about what a good family they had. But none of them suspected what changes awaited her. Sophia started her new position. Nick continued to sow the reasonable, good, eternal, and indoctrinate young minds with theorems and logarithms. And Helen dreamed of a career as a journalist. It seemed like it would be like that for many years to come. But life arranged otherwise. After a staff meeting in the district administration, Sophia went to a cafe for a snack. She made an order, and having taken a table in a secluded corner of the hall with an appetite, began to eat at You Are Not Busy? With a polite smile, asked a solid man about 50 years old, dressed in a dark gray suit with thin stripes. Sophia shook her head. And you are the new deputy head of the administration of the village, aren't you? The man asked. That's right. Why is it nice to see another spectacular woman in such a responsible position? I forgot what's your name. Sorry, it's just a lot of names, surnames, and patronymics to memorize. Sophia Corver. She introduced herself. Oh, nice to meet you. The man stretched out. Well, I'm the head of Citizen Services. Thomas Parker. You've heard of him. Sophia nodded with a faint smile. Well, that's great. That day, the colleagues chatted and separated. When an administration employee came in, she knew Parker, of course. When Sophia was a specialist, she traveled to the administration office once a month with a report and sometimes ran into him in the hallway. Parker couldn't help but know Sophia by sight. After all, in so many years of work, everyone had managed to be attracted to each other. However, it had only now come to a personal acquaintance. Sophia had heard from colleagues that Parker was a womanizer. It was common for him to fix a young secretary, which, by the way, periodically changed. At one time, there were rumors that one of the secretaries was forced to resign at the insistence of her husband. It was rumored that one of the secretaries was forced to resign at the insistence of her husband, who had somehow found out that the young wife was having an affair with the head of the Department for Work with Citizens. It seems that Thomas was married twice, and from each wife he had a child. By the way, his first wife, Emily, had a great career in the same system and made it to the regional administration. Sophia had already forgotten about that lunch at the staff meeting because she had so much work to do that she had no time to remember. And what was there to remember? It was just an ordinary business lunch, of which there would be many more. Hello, is Sophia Corver there? She heard a vaguely familiar voice. I'm listening, she answered. Oh, Sophia here. This is Thomas Parker. Remember him? Yes, of course. In a discreet, businesslike manner, Sophia replied. What do you want? I'd like to make an appointment with you in the same formal tone, he said, and felt it necessary to add. A business meeting, of course. Your head is on vacation. On vacation. She confirmed it. Well then, all questions I solve with you as with, and oh, okay. What is it you'd like to discuss with me? Sophia, don't get your hopes up. With a slight chuckle in his voice, Parker replied. We'll talk about it when we meet. I'll see you at 3 p.m. When Sophia went to the reception desk, the receptionist was absent. Strange, she thought, and knocked quietly on the office door. Yes, yes, Sophia heard, a cheerful voice. Parker, and opened the door. Sophia, you've already arrived, he asked, and pointing to a soft chair next to a beautifully shaped magazine table gallantly spoke, have a seat. I will now. Sophia obediently sat down, and Thomas went into a funny room, which apparently served as a kind of kitchen, and came back with the payment and a bottle of champagne, not cheap, by the way. But there, he smiled. That seems to be it now. What's all this for? Sophia asked, and looking at the table, in the very center stood a small fruitcake, which, as far as she knew, could only be purchased in a restaurant. In addition to the cake, there were caviar cakes on the table, 3 different salads. What for? Thomas smiled broadly. It's a business meeting. I find it easier to solve issues at a set table, so to speak, in a trusting atmosphere. What's cultured and efficient, don't you think? To be honest, I hadn't thought about it, the woman replied with a shrug. She was beginning to realize that a business meeting was out of the question. That was all she needed. Parker said emphatically, even in our backwater, culture is not a bad thing. Can't hurt. Sophia nodded. What do I mean? He rejoiced. And then, when I make an appointment with a beautiful woman, no matter what the occasion, I always prepare for it properly. So what did you want to discuss with me? She took the bull by the horns. She didn't like this business meeting. What if, God forbid, someone found out about it? A lot of things. Sophia replied nonchalantly to the head of the Citizens Affairs Department. For example, about how to raise the standard of living in the neighborhood. And you want to discuss it with me personally, she grinned. Why not? And Parker steered the gas. You live in cubicles, and therefore you know the problems of the village firsthand, don't you? Well, that's just it. Champagne, pouring. And what am I really boring, Sophia thought. After all, a new position is not only new responsibilities, but also new opportunities. There is an opportunity to drink champagne and talk about life with one of the department heads, so I'll make the most of it. How long can I sit in my village and not see the light of day? And if anyone sniffs, I have nothing to be ashamed of. If I don't allow it, it won't happen. I'm not a young secretary. That's the spirit. Approved Parker and poured champagne into glasses. Well, very tasty. With a smile, said a colleague. A nice drink. I love it. I love it too, he nodded. You eat salads. Cake all in the restaurant ordered. Fresh, delicious. Surprisingly, but now the solid head of the department seemed Sophia so simple and homely. Probably that's how his family and friends knew him. It occurred to her, I wonder why he got divorced. And then she was ashamed of her thoughts. Why pry into someone else's life? Shall we do it again? Parker smiled, and not immediately heard Sophia, immersed in his own thoughts. I suggest we do it again. Is it just me, or are you tense? Everything is fine, assured the guest. I will gladly drink more champagne. Sophia, won't you be offended if the second toast is for you? The owner of the office asked not only jokingly, but also seriously. Why should it offend me? She was surprised. I don't know. Well, Thomas, champagne is good, of course. But let's get to why you invited me here. Sophia said in a businesslike tone. Our neighborhood, as you quite rightly pointed out, needs improvement. And when it comes to this particular booth, I have some thoughts. Parker grunted in surprise, but the guest smiled dazzlingly as if she hadn't noticed. We'll discuss it. The dinner was conducted in a strictly businesslike manner. Sophia realized that this was not what Parker was expecting, but there was nothing she could do to please him. He did not hint at a closer acquaintance, for he realized that he would receive a strong rebuff, and for a womanizer like Parker, that was simply unacceptable. It's embarrassing and humiliating. No, it's a gradual thing. Usually a couple of bottles of champagne was enough. I must say, the conversations about improving the standard of living in the neighborhood went well. Thomas listened to Sophia's proposal, and an hour later she called the driver. So soon. Parker stretched out disappointedly. But I guess that's the end of the matter. Corver waved her hands. He wanted to add that he had ordered a sauna, but he stopped talking. I wanted to say that you are absolutely right, smiled charmingly at the person in charge of working with citizens. I will certainly take into account all your wishes and, as they say, let's get to work. When the driver pulled up, Parker escorted Sophia to the car like a true gentleman. He wanted to kiss her hand, but came to his senses in time. Why gossip? It was one thing to spend time with a young and free employee like him, and quite another to spend time with a family woman, the deputy head of the administration. Parker gallantly opened Sophia's doors as the car moved off, admiringly thought this woman. Parker went up to his office, poured champagne, and thought deeply. The head of the department clearly understood this woman. He had a great hookup with his second wife, the same one who had a great career. Thomas had divorced 3 years ago and was no longer eager to remarry. Why should he? He never saw a woman as a free cleaning lady or a cook. But from time to time, he thought there was no need to marry. Parker was clean and, as far as time allowed, did not neglect cleaning. In addition, he was a good cook and knew a dozen interesting recipes for those who do not have time. And lately, Thomas was often ordering food from a restaurant. That's funny. What about the automatic washing machine? For what? Well, as for natural male needs, women who are ready for anything have not yet outlived someone, and serious status did not stop someone, not to mention young secretaries. Those, however, had their own interest in advancing their careers. But here Parker had an iron principle: he never made patronage to any of his own for chills. Have you tried studying? Lovely ladies. Parker had a daughter growing up from his second marriage. If he suddenly found out that Mila was trying to make a career through bed, she would be in trouble. He'd known Sophia Corver for a long time, but he'd hardly ever crossed paths with her. They used to say hello in the corridor of the district administration. Sophia was a good-looking woman back then. But he had plenty of that goodness, and he had plenty of that goodness. Thomas Parker knew perfectly well that he was considered a womanizer and did not deny it. But the people around him were wrong about something. Parker did not chase every skirt. Some quite pretty women didn't stand a chance. He didn't like or recognize vulgar and mercantile individuals at first sight. Young duck secrets didn't count. After all, youth and freshness are beyond competition. When Sophia was appointed deputy chairman of the village council, he considered it the right decision. Corver was not only an attractive woman, but also a conscientious worker and undoubtedly deserved the promotion. And after socializing with Corver, he appreciated her in every way. Suddenly, Parker thought that with such a woman I would like to live the rest of my life. And was surprised to think, what about his love of order? A culinary talent, a car, a machine, and a bunch of ladies for lovemaking. It's an interesting question, of course. The head of the Citizens Department suddenly laughed, to think he had been discovered, but not quite discovered. But for the first time in his life, a meeting with a woman had not gone according to the Parker's scenario. And yet, despite this unfortunate circumstance, the mood was great. He'd enjoyed himself, and that was worth a lot. And as for the rest, well, as they say, there's bad luck for old men. And then Thomas Parker is not used to giving up without a fight. The more difficult the task, the more interesting it is. The head of the department drank champagne and ate cake. And looking at his watch, he called the driver. "Would you be so kind as to sign this?" He said, "The traffic will start soon, and I'm tired as a dog." "Okay, Thomas. And your application is accepted and will be considered within 3 working days," said Sophia to another visitor. "Goodbye, goodbye," replied pensioner Frank. Sophia's head had been spinning all day since that private business meeting at the district administration a week had passed. Memories of it made Sophia smile. The man had spent on the road, champagne and hors d'oeuvres from the restaurant. And she was proud. What's pride got to do with it? She and Parker were in a purely working relationship, and she didn't think of anything else. And if that was the case, she should have made it clear to him right away. Sophia was sure that in a few days the head of the Citizens Affairs Department would forget about her. And he should have. "Sophia, the specialist Jenna told you this, and brought a small, pretty basket of blood roses into her office. "Thank you, Jenna," she nodded. Sophia already knew who the flowers were from. She felt uneasy. She had no idea how to react, and that made her feel uncomfortable. But at least I can call and say thank you, Sophia thought. "Glad you liked it," Parker replied. And there was a smile in his voice. There was an awkward silence. Sophia broke the silence. "Yes. And it would not be impertinent of me to invite you to dinner at the restaurant." "Thomas, I don't think it's necessary," Sophia replied firmly. "But why don't you really understand?" "I confess I don't. I'm a married woman. I'm in a position of authority and everything. And you, Thomas, have a tarnished reputation." He smirked. "In other words, a reputation as a womanizer." "Right. But I didn't say that," Sophia grinned back. "You don't have to say anything." "Sophia, it's just dinner." Parker didn't give up. She asked ironically. Of course, Thomas didn't hesitate. How could it not be? Suddenly, Sophia realized that she wanted to go to a restaurant. It seemed to her that she had recently fulfilled the norm of her former working life. So why not have a little celebration? "You know, I think I'd agree," Sophia said. True, Parker sounded genuinely happy. She thought again that the head of the Citizens Affairs Department, whom the neighborhood knows, and the one who was talking to her at that moment were two different people. "Yes," Sophia replied discreetly. "Wonderfully received, Parker." Businesslike tone. "My driver will pick you up for bed at 5, she asked fearfully. "Yeah, what's the big deal?" "What time do I get home?" "Oh, Sophia," the colleague laughed. "You probably haven't heard anything yet. He has irregular working days, which is a common thing in your position. A working moment. Yes, only there's something else." "There's nothing." Sophia wanted to say that she didn't have the right dress, but thought it was unnecessary. In Sophia's opinion, a man shouldn't know about such things. She walked over to the large full-length mirror hanging in the study. What exactly is wrong with a suit? She thought. A dark blue pantsuit, intricate trim on the lapel and cuffs of the jacket. It looked very impressive. "I wish I had a little more makeup and jewelry. You can do without it. The gold trim looks pretty flashy. And I think there was an elegant and wide-brimmed hat in the closet." Sophia bought it recently, but never brought it home. But here it is ready to cheer up the evening ensemble, she thought. "There is only one thing left to settle Nick. I will be late tonight," Sophia told her husband. Suddenly she felt like a schoolgirl. "And what are these trips?" Cindy, the accountant, looked out of the window. "But what's not to be clear about?" snickered Jenna, escaping to the tea party hat flowers. "A driver at the end of the day. And you think about it." "Really?" The elderly accountant gasped. "And I thought she was decent." "She has such a good husband. A daughter. Well, give a man a diplomat, and he'll show his true colors. And everyone knows what goes on upstairs. They're all related, for God's sake," the specialist ranted. "But our doggy's got it." "That's right," the accountant nodded. "Well, and then the sight of the little one, it seems, did not go in vain. After all, she's always oppressed Nick. Here is the result." "Yes," Cindy sighed. "And what a nice family they were, weren't they?" Every dog in the stalls knew about the relationship between the math teacher and his mother-in-law. Moreover, it was one of the most discussed topics in the store, in the nurse's station, and of course, in the village administration. Well, now Sophia's colleagues had something to discuss. And in the light of recent events, it looked a little spicy. "Cindy, please." Jenna rolled her eyes. "Why worry about them? Nick, if anything, who will be there to comfort them. Everyone knows the vice principal's got a crush on him. Molly's a very attractive woman, by the way. Not like our duck. Yeah, it's like Santa Barbara all over again." The women laughed merrily and continued to grind the bones of the deputy head and the rest of the villagers. "Sophia, I'm speechless," Parker exclaimed. "I didn't mince words." "Are you charming?" "Thank you," she smiled. "What's the harm in that? It was a pleasure." But at the same time, a strange uneasiness settled in her soul. Maybe it was a premonition. "What will you have to drink?" Thomas asked. "At your discretion? To be honest, I don't know much about wine." "Then I'd recommend a Spanish wine, very bright, very tasty." "Well then, let's have the Spanish wine." Sophia nodded. They drank the wine, which indeed turned out to be amazingly tasty, ate shish kebab of sturgeon with spicy sweet sauce, and talked about everything in the world. Parker proved to be an interesting conversationalist, and the time flew by in a flash. My God, it was already 9:30. Sophia gasped, looking at her watch. They'll be worried at home. Thomas nodded understandingly. Well, of course, she replied and went to her purse for her phone. Where the hell did it go? Sophia cheerfully turned to her colleague. Wait a minute. Sophia waved Sophia away with annoyance, intending to dump the contents of her purse on the table. Sophia mockingly held out Parker. I apologize profusely for interrupting what appears to be a fascinating pastime, but maybe you're looking for this. He pointed with a smile to Sophia's cell phone lying on the table. And both of them, without conspiring, spluttered. Cheerfully, she said, Husband, you have not lost me. Well, great, I'll be there soon. Love you. Parker felt a prick of jealousy and sadly stated, well, I guess the banquet is over. Sophia waved her hands. It can't be helped. They're waiting for me at home. Well, if they are, when she entered the house, her husband was awake. Have you been drinking? Nick asked, looking at her intently. I had a drink, Sophia nodded. There was a small banquet after the administration meeting. Something was wrong. Was it Nick's imagination, or was there a challenge in his wife's last sentence? Why not? He shrugged. You're entitled. You weren't brought here under the arm. Yeah, the wife muttered. I'm sorry. I'm tired. Let's go to bed. The New Year's Eve corporate party for employees of the administration was prepared on a grand scale. A newly opened restaurant was engaged for this purpose. The conversations of the administration staff were all on the same topic. Ladies' outfits I have already looked through long, revealing with a cut to the thigh. But you're not wearing that kind of fire, not at my size. Oh, come on. It's not a problem. Put on a high-waisted dress and you'll be happy. You'll look slimmer and prettier, and you'll show off your legs. I want to wear red, but I don't know if it's appropriate. Girls, whose year is this? Secretaries, accountants, specialists, and higher-ranking employees resembled schoolgirls on the eve of a party. And it was a very pretty sight. Sophia, like her coworkers, was also racking her brains over what kind of outfit to buy to make everyone aha. Come on, mentally under the case, but on herself, so everyone. After that dinner at the restaurant, Sophia felt something had changed. She didn't know what it was yet, but it was obvious. And then there was that stare from Nick. Did he suspect something? There was nothing to suspect. She and Parker never saw each other again, since they were both busy with work on New Year's Eve. And yet, on Sunday, Sophia went into town to pick up her mom's dress. Well, that's so last century, Helen remarked. When the mother voiced her plans, that is, did not understand Sophia. So now everyone orders in online stores, right? Explained the girl. Yes, but what about trying it on? So it can be done at the point of delivery. Maybe, Sophia grinned. But I'm used to the old-fashioned way. You should. I will keep up with the times, she smiled and went outside. The weather was fantastic. It was warm and the snow was falling quietly. I wish we had this kind of weather at Christmas, Sophia thought dreamily and frowned. Most of the time the holidays were a challenge to her psyche. As usual, her mom would show up and start bad-mouthing Nick. What the hell? Rarely, very rarely without that cataclysm. Sophia suddenly pictured Parker in Nick's place and wondered, I wonder what kind of relationship they'd have with Mom. And the woman sighed heavily. She'd been thinking about him a lot lately. What was that about? Sophia reached the bus stop and said hello to her fellow villagers. The retired headmistress said hello and looked at her strangely. Some of the people standing at the bus stop followed her example, and Sophia felt naked. What are they looking at? 5 minutes later, Sophia's bus pulled up. Please come in, Will said kindly. A student visiting his parents for the weekend. Thank you, Will. She smiled gratefully at the guy and suddenly heard someone murmur. Tell me, please, what honors? Sophia could have been mistaken, of course, but the voice seemed to belong to Anna, Betty's friend. She had sat with Anna more than once at the same table with relatives. Sophia had always thought that Betty's friend was quite nice to her. So what's the matter? There were those looks too. Sophia took her seat and decided to keep her head down. It was no secret to her that her appointment to a new position was received ambiguously by the people. Many were genuinely happy for Sophia, noting that but she deserved the promotion. But not without detractors. God only knows what they argued their discontent. But the fact remained that there were such people. But was it worth paying attention to them? You can't please everyone philosophically, Sophia summed up. For shopping, she chose a hypermarket 2 stops away from the bus station. The market was definitely not suitable for this purpose. Sophia walked through the boutiques. Her eyes were dazzled by the variety of colors and styles. The woman stopped at a marvelously beautiful evening dress, a relay of color and rice. It would go perfectly with her dark Russian hair and gray eyes. The dress cost more than half her paycheck, but it was so beautiful. And if you pictured it with newly bought shoes, clutch sharpening, and beautiful makeup, it was fire. To take it or not to take it? That was the question. Mentally paraphrased Sophia of the famous writer Sophia. She heard a painfully familiar voice, and that was the meeting. In front of her stood none other than Parker. "Hello," confused woman said. "What are you doing here?" "Having fun?" Thomas asked. "I'm just picking out a dress for corporate events." A necessary thing, he approved. "How's that going?" "I haven't picked anything out yet," Sophia admitted. "Why not?" "It's just something." "I think this purple one is really nice," Parker said in a businesslike tone, and looking at the dress she was looking at. I think Sophia thought dejectedly too. "But for the money it costs, you could live on it for almost a month." "You know what? Why don't I give you this dress?" Thomas suggested as if he were buying a candy bar. What did the coworker fearfully ask? "No, that's out of the question." "But I can see you like it." "You don't," he said. "Do you like it?" Nodded Sophia. But it's very expensive." "No, Thomas, I can't accept such a gift," she said firmly. "No more than money." Parker wouldn't give up. "Well, I can't take no for an answer. I need a hint." As if out of nowhere, a young salesgirl materialized. "No." Sophia shook her head, stuttering with excitement. But her unexpected companion unhesitatingly declared and to tell, and to show, and it would be good to help to decide on the accompanying goods. "Well, there are handbags, shoes. In general, you know yourself. And now the lady wants to try on this dress." The sales consultant looked questioningly at Sophia, and she nodded. She was already convinced that Parker knew how to insist. So was it really worth it? Grabbing her dress, Sophia left, for example. And when the colleague came out, he was speechless. "Sophia, I'm blown away," Parker said. "Is it really so terrible?" She smiled. "It's not. Just awful. Terrible, beautiful. No, it's a stunning dress. It really looks like it's made on you," the saleswoman said with a smile. "I want to offer you these shoes." The girl took out of the box silk, lilac, pink shoes, decorated with bows with decorations. "We'll take them from you too." Without giving Sophia a second thought, Thomas said, "And you need a treasure too." So Sophia became the happy owner of dress shoes and elegant treasure. Reshed his fancy shimmer and crystals. Parker pulled out his credit card, and despite Sophia's protests, Sophia paid up. So uncomfortable, she slipped in pitifully. "Uncomfortable," Thomas interjected. He looked at her strangely. "Yeah, and if I offered to take you home in my car, that would be awkward too." "And you want to suggest it," said Sophia in a thin voice, "and not just suggest it." Parker nodded and added, "I'll insist." "And not just suggest it." Parker nodded and added, "I will insist." "Then you'd better say yes right away," she grinned, determined to pay him back for all this splendor at the first opportunity. Right. The colleagues left the hypermarket, not realizing that she was watching them. "Cinderella's friend, Sophia. Here is my carriage," Thomas said proudly, opening the door. Parker drove a dark cherry-colored Ford. The car looked brand new. He added, as if reading Sophia's mind, "It's beautiful." "I like it too," Parker nodded and sighed, asking Sophia, "Don't you think something is happening to us?" Actually, she didn't think there was anything going on with them. But Sophia was more worried about something else. What to do about it? I don't know, she said quietly. Not true, Parker whispered, leaning toward Sophia. He gently took the woman's chin and looked into her eyes as if asking her something. Sophia covered her eyes for a moment, as if answering him yes, and in just a second, they broke. Oh, like schoolboys, Parker laughed a few minutes later, and Sophia was in complete agreement with him. Now she felt like a schoolgirl who had kissed for the first time in her life, and now she was afraid that her mom would find out and scold her. Except that it was not only about mom, but also about her husband and daughter. It was about them first of all, though it's unlikely the mom is either. Wendy, despite the contrast with Nick, would approve of her daughter's behavior. And so it was when Parker brought Sophia home. Her husband wasn't with her daughter. That was good for her. It was embarrassing to face them. And the next day, it seemed that everyone in the village knew that Sophia Corver had come home with some guy in a car. She was sitting in her office drinking coffee when her mother called. What the hell are you doing? Going off the deep end? Wendy's on a roll. So Sophia thought doomfully. I think it's starting. If until yesterday she had nothing to hide, now the situation had changed. It's not proper for a married woman to make out in a car with her face. However, it's all yours too. Good morning, Mom, Sophia said calmly. And you are sure that it is good, gargled, and the mother of the whole village only says that you were brought yesterday by car. Well, what's criminal about it? She asked in a friendly manner. What's criminal about it? Yelled Wendy. So the daughter took the phone away from her ear to ride in a car with someone else's man. That sounds normal to you? Mom slowed down and said, Sophia, riding around with another man's man. Maybe it's not normal. Only I did not ride and came home with a colleague whom I met in the city and who bought you a dress and shoes. Mother interrupted me. Aren't you ashamed to accept gifts from a man? It makes things more complicated. It's a loan, she said. The first thing that came to mind, a loan. The old woman asked incredulously. Yeah, I haven't heard anything about a paycheck yet. And we have a corporate party in 3 days. Sophia lied inspirationally. We're going to a new restaurant. We're going out with the district administration. So you have to be on your best behavior. What did I tell you? Your husband doesn't know how to make money. Do you need to be on top of your game right now? And not just at the New Year's Eve party. Why don't you come to the party? It would have been a dime a dozen. Mom, what's the point of this? She sighed tiredly. You know what time he comes? Oh, it's been a long time. With annoyance, said Wendy. I wish you well. Do you? What's in it for me? What do you want? I want you to get your husband up to look for a part-time job, or better yet, another job. Sophia laughed, glad that the conversation had moved on to a less sensitive topic. And where is she in the village? That's another job. If only to become a laborer. You could start your own business, he grumbled. After all, he's a mathematician. Just knowing math isn't enough. You need an entrepreneurial spirit. And I don't have one. She summed it up triumphantly. What did she have to prove? You got a worthless man. Mom, let's figure out our family life on our own sometime. For probably the 1000th time, Sophia said. And anyway, I have to work. So bye. And in the evening, she had a talk with her husband. Sophia, while Helen is out walking, we need to talk. He didn't waste time with the preface. Well, we need to, then we need to. I agree, Sophia nodded, realizing what the conversation would be about. Nick had been ready for a serious conversation since morning, and now he didn't know how to start. Not sure where to start. She assumed, and I'll get you a paper. You heard that idiotic rumor that I got a ride home from some guy in a foreign car. And now you want to hold me accountable. Why would you want to hold me accountable? Peacefully hummed husband. I just want to understand the situation and understand. We're still a family. Sophia, I've always been honest with you, so I think I can expect the same. Yes, of course, Sophia nodded. But I have nothing to repent of. I always thought you were above gossip. I was wrong. And I can't have this conversation, Nick said thoughtfully. And his wife thought that he was probably right. What's the point of talking about it? Nick, there's nothing to talk about, she exclaimed. He had a ride. I don't deny it. But it wasn't some guy, it was a colleague, the head of the Citizens Affairs Department. I met him by chance at the hypermarket, and he drove me home. That's it. So he went to the village on purpose to take you home. Nick squinted incredulously. And before that, he bought himself an expensive dress and something to go with it. The situation is more serious than Sophia realized. I wonder how much she'll find out later. What if Nick got wind of that kiss in the car? Desperate, she thought to Dawn. The windows were tinted, and the car was far from the parking lot, but still. And who the hell was following me? Sophia ordered herself to be calm. If anyone knew about that kiss, her mother would have mentioned it. Wendy's daughter had kept silent about it. Anyway, calm is only calm. Oh, we know so much, Sophia shook her head. But since you have an informant, he should have reported to you that my mysterious admirer bought me this dress on credit. On credit. Yeah, why are you surprised? Well, what if you hadn't met him? Nick, you should be an interrogator, grinned the wife. If I hadn't met him, I would have bought a cheaper dress or called someone. There'd be more questions. Sorry, crushed, muttered Nick. Sophia walked over to her husband and stroked his hair. With a smile, she said, "Let's just forget about it. And let it be the worst thing that happened to us." I agree, he smiled back and intercepted his wife's hand and kissed it. I see you have peace, friendship, love, cheerfully said the daughter who came in. Did you expect us to fight here? Her mother asked with a grin. No, Helen shook her head. It's just nice to see once again that the parents are doing well. The girl undressed and went to her room. I heard what she said. Sophia said quietly, so we'll try to fit in. With tenderness, said her husband. Sophia tried her best to fit in and seemed to succeed. She ignored the general message for the entire 3 days, remaining before the corporate party at the restaurant. Parker, the trips to the district administration with Sophia was entrusted to Jenna, arguing that she was busy, which, however, was true. She answered his calls dryly and one syllable, letting him know that they could only have a business relationship and nothing more. And after the new year, the head will come out of vacation, and everything will be back to normal. Good, Sophia thought with relief. It didn't cost me anything. That's just it. The restaurant, where the corporate party was held, had been opened recently, so it looked untouched and somehow uninhabited. Perhaps it was the high-tech style of the place. Sophia suddenly felt like a snow queen in her ice kingdom. Not to give away, only she guessed that the gossip about her and Parker came from the native village council. And now the co-workers were clearly eager for it to continue. Sophia decided she would not give them that pleasure. She kept talking about her work, had fun, danced, enjoyed delicious food and drinks, and did not give away her desire to approach Parker, and ideally to torture herself with him, and repeat that kiss again and again. May I invite you gallantly, gave her his hand. Michael, the head of the agriculture department, and Sophia nodded with a smile. Tonight was going to be fun, and Sophia was having fun. She settled into her seat and found herself a cold soda. And 5 minutes later, a security officer came up to her and asked her to dance as well. Our Sophia is a real hot commodity, commented Cindy the accountant. And Parker is not without tears. Her assistant Nina chuckled. The head of the Citizens Affairs Department poured one drink after another and from time to time cast hateful glances at Sophia. And when the security officer, as befitted a true gentleman, escorted the lady to her seat at the table, Parker approached her with a firm step. The audience froze in anticipation of a dance performance. With forbidding language, he suggested Sophia. Thomas, are you sure? She said with a polite smile. Maybe you should sit down. I decide what's best for me. Parker said, but we're on a first-name basis. No, Sophia blurted out, and the almost inferior crowd perked their ears at you. Thomas, what are you doing? Michael tried to defuse the situation. It's okay. Who doesn't? A man's had a little too much to drink. It's just an everyday thing. Let's call a cab. But who has a cell phone nearby? An administration employee from a neighboring village readily took out a phone from her purse and started dialing the number of the cab service, and Michael felt it necessary to warn. And without any stupid woman's gossip, I'll rip my tongue out myself. To say the audience was disappointed was to say nothing. The cab arrived 5 minutes later. Parker was escorted to the car and the fun continued. Sophia could physically feel the stares of her colleagues, and after a while she hurriedly turned away, citing the headache. The next day, Parker sent Sophia a message apologizing for her behavior. Apology accepted. Happy New Year. Was it written? Christmas was spent alone with Nick. Wendy went to a sanatorium on a voucher for pensioners, and Helen, having met Christmas and scared in a salad, went to celebrate the holiday in the company of classmates. You know, said Nick, I've wanted to celebrate Christmas with you for a long time. But there's always someone else around. Sophia said cheerfully, or someone will show up. That New Year's Eve, the Corver couple felt young and hopeful for the first time in a long time. They chatted merrily and had a delicious meal. Ice-cold champagne they recalled carefree youth, the time of the courtship, the wedding, the news of the long-awaited addition to the family, the birth. Niece? Yeah, it was great. Sophia smiled as she sipped her champagne. Do you remember how you gave me cosmetics and golden balls? You bet I do. Her husband laughed. It was you from Grandma's paratrooper. Oh, and hit me then. And the old lady, by the way, had a heavy hand. That night, nobody came to see them. Sophia guessed why. But she didn't care about that now. Let them watch their families. Sophia thought, falling asleep in Nick's arms. I have the coolest husband in the world, and we have a wonderful daughter. The New Year's holidays are relaxing after all. Sophia tried to concentrate on her work, but it was not going well. The same thing seemed to be happening with the other employees. She went to Paulina's office and, with annoyance, noting that she was not there, went to the accounting department. And so it was. Together with Irina and Veronica again. They're washing someone's bones, Jenna. I asked you to prepare the certificates this morning, said Sophia. Where are they? I'm leaving in 10 minutes. Are you going to sign for me? Jenna reluctantly got up and went to her office. And the deputy manager saw the car and left. I'll be there soon. When Sophia entered the agriculture department, she ran into Parker there. Oh, Sophia, in my honor, he smiled. How are you? How was the holidays? Thank you. All good. Choppy, Sophia replied. Excuse me. I have to go. Yeah, sure, we'll talk again. Thomas sounded a little too meaningful. She soon realized what the tone meant. The agricultural department in Sofia informed her that she was to be sent to the regional center. For how long? She asked. For 24 hours, answered the head of the department. You will get your daily allowance in the accounting department and come straight to me. Okay, Sophia nodded and left the office. I guess you already know. Thomas entered the office with a smile. What do you mean? And business trips, of course, he shrugged. When Sophia returned to the agricultural department, she learned that she was traveling with Parker. She was terribly tempted to refuse. But under what sauce would she do it? And then, if she refused, it would give the department head some interesting ideas. And Sophia wouldn't want that. She's had enough of the New Year's Eve party. Surely the cuckoos, despite the warnings, were already scratching their tongues. Sophia went on a business trip with Parker. This trip was the beginning of their passionate affair. Both realized there was no point in hiding your feelings under lock and key. And be honest, was this trip in your prayers? Sophia asked, snuggling into his shoulder. But what was I supposed to do? Thomas sighed, pretending to sigh. You were avoiding me. And then there was that stupid corporate party. Drunk like an idiot. Wanted a bloody. What's going to happen now? She said thoughtfully. And everything depends on us. I want to be with you if you become my wife. Then the gossips won't dare say a word. Well, that's true. But Nick? What about Nick? Isn't Nick a little boy who'll get over it? He's not old yet. He'll find someone else. You just shook your head. Sophia. Oh, sweetheart. I've been divorced twice. And as a person with experience, I can say that there's really nothing terrible about it. It's more of a people thing. To me, it's really simple. If the marriage has come to an end, there is no point in saving it, and it is better to try to become happy again. And if there's someone you want to be with, then God knows what to do. You're probably right, she agreed. But you see, I don't have that experience, and it's really hard and uncomfortable for me. I understand, with sympathy, Parker said. Helen is graduating from high school this year, Sophia continued. She's looking forward to graduation and having her mom and dad present together. They are together, being divorced. No, Jen, I'm not ready to make that decision yet. You don't have to, he smiled. Just to be near. And there, as they say, there will be a day, there will be food. Thank you for what? For understanding. Believe me, it's not easy for me, Thomas sighed. But I'm willing to wait as long as it takes. A year passed. On Helen's birthday, all the relatives gathered at the Corver house. If Betty held a grudge against her brother, she prudently kept it to herself. She had come to congratulate her niece, and everything else was none of her business except the relatives and closest family friends. The party was attended by half of her classmates, the celebrant, and 2 friends from the university she had safely entered. Nick and Sophia were only too happy to welcome their daughter's new friends into their hospitable home. From the outside, everything looked the same as before, but only externally. Sophia, I was still seeing Thomas, and every day he got more and more insistent that she should divorce Nick and live with him one day. Parker said, I don't know about you, but I'm sick and tired of this conspiracy. What could she say? Sophia was even worse for leading a double life for a year. What kind of nerves do you have to have? Except that sometimes it seemed to Eugenia that it was easier and easier for her. Sophia exclaimed in amazement when the lover voiced it. Do you think I should lie to the man I love in my own way? Yes, I do. At least as the father of my daughter, it's easier. You think so highly of me. That's when they had their first fight. Thomas apologized for a long time. Her heart shook. Then followed a rather long conversation, during which Sophia decided to tell her husband about the divorce when Len turned 18. And so that day came, and Sophia realized with annoyance that she couldn't decide to tell Nick about the divorce. Sophia, but no one pulled you by the tongue. Parker pointed out. Did you make this decision on your own? I don't want to pressure you in any way. But if you don't do what you said you do, I'll start thinking that you don't know how to keep your word. You're right, she said. But I need a little time. How much time is a little time? Thomas squinted. Zen, but we're not in a market. All right. He held up his hands as if in surrender. All right, I'll wait a little longer. I don't know what you're waiting for. Kate, who worked in the registry office, said perplexed. The women had become friends over the year, and Kate was the only person who knew the details of their relationship. She was Thomas's childhood friend, by the way. Sophia was jealous at first, but then she realized there was nothing to fear. If Kate and Thomas didn't have an affair when they were young or even when they were older, it was unlikely to happen at all. What are you waiting for? She repeated. You love him. He loves you. So what's the problem? Thousands of couples marry and divorce. So you're not the first, you're not the last. Nick, that's a shame. What about Helen? Sophia shook her head at her friend. Do you feel sorry for everyone? But the farther into the forest, the more wood. If you want to know, I've never seen Thomas like that. For him, relationships with women have always been a kind of sporting competition. Really, every woman was like a victory for him. And with you, everything changed and Sophia made up her mind. Nick, we need to talk, she said. Her heart was beating like crazy, but there was nowhere to retreat to. At that moment, Nick was feeling the same thing. All this time, he was subconsciously waiting for this conversation. After all, he didn't live on Mars. However, deep down, Nick hoped that it was just an affair. Sonia will outweigh it, and everything will be the same. Turns out, no. Nick, I'm not gonna beat around the bush. Yeah, around. I'm leaving. Sophia suddenly felt a weight lifted off her shoulders. Wow, turns out this isn't scary at all. What was I expecting? I can't say I'm happy. But now that you've made up your mind. Nick, you're a wonderful you. Oh, don't do that, he wrinkled his nose. As they say, here's God. And here's the threshold, and there's nothing more to talk about. I'm going tomorrow. Not believing her happiness, said Sophia. As you wish. The next day, she moved into town to Parker's house. Come in, he fussed. We're going to celebrate. I'm not divorced yet. Sophia laughed, but it's only a matter of time. Thomas's apartment was spacious and bright, and looked nothing like a bachelor pad. Everything has been meticulously cleaned, interior cut, the work of a top-notch designer. Pleased, the host pointed toward the hall, where Sophia was waiting for a sumptuously set table. In the very center stood a goose with apples, and there was an Olivier salad, a salad of shrimp, avocado, and egg bindings with a creamy seafood assortment sauce. Miniature chocolate cakes with whipped cream. What restaurant did you order from? Sophia asked. What restaurant? Pretend. Thomas was indignant. With the exception of the cakes, I made everything myself. My favorite woman moved in. Good girl. She smiled and kissed him on the cheek. So what are we waiting for? I'm hungry like a wolf. What will you have? Wine, cognac, champagne. Well, I'll have a whiskey, said Parker, and the lovers began their meal. How delicious, Sophia said with admiration, tasting the sleeve salad. It's from Italian cuisine. I like it very much too. Do you know what my dream is? Asked Thomas after the second toast, which was to love. And what's that? To meet your daughter. Sophia's soul was singing. Today she called Helen and informed her of the impending divorce. To her great relief, her daughter was very understanding. I'll introduce you, Sophia promised. For the second time in the last 24 hours, she was surprised at how simple everything was. But unfortunately, it wasn't. After the divorce, Nick became addicted to alcohol. At first, he'd have a drink or two after work. But as time went on, things took a serious turn. One day, Nick showed up at school with a bad hangover, for which he was sharply reprimanded by the principal. The mathematician apologized and said it wouldn't happen again. Kelly, he's not really drunk. The vice principal stood up for him. At least the man had some drama in his personal life. Who doesn't? The principal grinned. Even for students was not a secret that Molly has long been unevenly breathing to the math teacher. And here was such an opportunity to win the man of her dreams. And to say the vice principal had been a widow for 6 years. All right, Kelly relented. On your, Molly, responsibility. But if this happens again, I'm gonna have to talk to you differently, Nick. I hope you understand what I mean. I do, replied the mathematician briefly. Well and good. Let's get on with our work. The incident never happened again. And a couple of months later, after a corporate birthday party, they decided to continue the banquet at Nick's. The cell phone was ringing off the hook, and Alex, the gym teacher, exclaimed in anger. Yours, that's the one. With annoyance nodded Alex. So calmed down. To hell with her. Alex, you're 100% wrong, said Nick. Do you know what this is called? What do we have? We don't keep it when we lose it. Oh, poor or what? Colleagues drank a shot each, and the gym teacher remarked, but freedom. Fuck that freedom, Nick said with tears in his voice. When I see Sofiaka coming to work with his whip, I'm ready to kill him. And why him? Alex grinned. There, I think your mother-in-law did her best, and ours was talking to the whole village about how worthless he was. But apparently her words fell on fertile ground. The coworker left, and Nick continued his outpourings in proud solitude. Alex's words about his mother-in-law's contribution to the divorce did not go out of his head, and he went to his ex-mother-in-law's house drunk and made a scandal. It's all your fault, you old witch, he yelled, flashing his eyes. Why? Wendy said nonchalantly. 3, you always said I was worthless. That said, confirmed the older woman. Wasn't she? And Nick couldn't keep a woman. So it's the mother-in-law's fault. Well done. I'm you old witch, threateningly said the former son-in-law and approached Wendy. Help, they're killing me. She paid with a voice not her own and ran out of the house. Nick, what are you doing? Shouted Betty, who came over. The neighbor told her that a drunken Nick had gone to his ex-mother-in-law's house. And the woman followed, just as long as he didn't do anything. I'll get her now, yelled the math teacher. I'll go to the district police officer. The old woman continued to yell, and such a person teaches children at school. Ah, disgusting. Fucking alcoholic. You can be sure I won't let it go. Wendy, honey, I'm so sorry, for God's sake. Betty begged her tearfully. You understand. I'll get on my knees to you, but don't go to the police station. To hell with you. The old woman came in with her and, cautiously squinting at her brother-in-law, went into the house, and Betty took her brother home, exhorting him that life doesn't end after divorce. I love her, Nick interjected to his sister. You know I love her. Betty just sighed heavily and thought, and they say women are stupid. A few days later, the story reached the education department, and the question of firing the mathematician arose. Colleagues were divided into those who argued that such behavior is completely unacceptable for a teacher and those who supported Nick. By the way, Sophia, feeling guilty before the former spouse, stood up in his defense. She tried by all means to persuade the education officer not to use such drastic measures. But alas, as a result, Nick was left without a job. He'll be lost, Sophia lamented. Don't exaggerate, replied Thomas. After all, he is a grown man, an intellectual. I think he will pull himself together in time. Oh, I don't know. I sighed. You know what she was thinking. Just promise me you won't take it personally. I get scared when you talk like that, Parker admitted. Yes, and it's really not a big deal. Anyway, maybe it makes sense to postpone the wedding. Why would I do that? I don't see any joy in that. Sophia's on. Yeah, I've been living like a hot frying pan. I'm probably the only lazy person who doesn't say behind my back, I've driven a man crazy. And they don't give a rat's ass about me trying to help him. And I still got a job to do, by the way. Well, the job isn't exactly a problem, Thomas said. There's a specialist in the civil registry office about to retire. Why? Will you look for a good option and work? Kate didn't tell me anything about that, she wondered. But you would. When was the last time you saw each other? About a couple weeks ago, Sophia recalled. But you see, the position's only been open for a week. I think we should hold off on the wedding after all. But think about it. Nick is in this situation, and I'm getting married. And you're like salt in the wound. Zen, but after all, we're living together. Well, okay, whatever you say, Parker gave in. In the end, they decided to postpone the wedding for a month. Nick felt empty and cold. His parents had passed away one by one many years ago. The wife he loved and idolized had left him for someone else. The daughter was studying to be a journalist in a regional city, and Nick was clear that Helen would not return to her native village, what with her profession here to do. With a sigh, he thought, except to visit, and now he didn't have a job either. Nick called his daughter almost every day, and Helen supported her father as best she could. She said that the divorce was not the end of life, and that Nick would still find happiness. In general, everything they usually say in such cases. If you want to come to my place, the daughter said. I'm working part-time now and renting an apartment. No, really, the only other person who supported him in any way was his sister Betty. You should come more often, she said. Why do you have to sit alone? Nick nodded uncertainly. What? Yeah, shouted the sister. Have you eaten at all today? I don't remember. He doesn't remember. But he remembered to get a bottle. Nick, but what are you turning into? The woman said in despair. Listen, why don't you stay with us? You'll come to your senses, and then we'll see what to do with you. Maybe we can find you a job. And Nick, Betty, he said quietly. Leave me alone. I'm sick enough as it is. The sister thought for a moment and walked out with a sigh. She walked home and thought about how easy it was to break something that had taken years to build up. Unlike her friend Anna, Betty was far from judging her former sister-in-law. But how painful it was to see past and washed-up addition Sophia while Nick trivialized. Betty approached the house and saw Anna sitting on a bench. Hi, her friend said with a smile. I'm here to see you. Well, hello, sighed Betty and invited Anna into the house. The women came into the kitchen and the hostess offered them tea. What tea is there? Betty waved it off. There's a lot going on here. And how can it be without special interest? Betty asked. Frankly speaking, she had enough of what was going on in their family. I heard the latest news was righteous anger, exclaimed Anna. Your ex was transferred to the civil registry office. In my opinion, Quite logically shrugged the landlady. After all, she lives in the city, and most likely it is inconvenient for her to go to work in the village. But for me, it's much simpler. She just had a guilty conscience, her friend declared triumphantly. So what's the matter? Betty grinned. So she has one. And I'll tell you something else. She postponed the wedding because of what happened to the can. But what a noble thing to do, huh? Anna shook her hands. Yes, they are without a stamp in the passport. They have been married for more than a year, and they live together. Not a big sacrifice. Betty suddenly felt incredibly disgusted. It felt like someone had tainted the air in the house. And you know what, Anne? After a little silence, she said, "Go away." She was stunned. "I don't get it. Are you defending her or something?" "Well, Betty didn't expect it. I mean, Nick is your brother Nick's brother. Not only am I his sister, but I'm also a woman. And as a woman, I understand Sophia. Maybe it's not love at all. But right now, at this moment, the pig is attracted to this man. Judgment. Who are we? Life will judge us. You go away." Nick kept drinking. Now he was living on the principle that a day had passed and it was all right. That's how it is. The villagers said. What a good family they had, eh? You can't be sure of anything. It seemed that it couldn't get any worse. But the worst was ahead. Nick, a former non-smoker, picked up the habit. And then one day, what Betty had feared would happen. That night, she couldn't sleep. The young woman, as if anticipating trouble, sat on the terrace and sold not cheerful thoughts. And when Betty smelled smoke, she realized with some sixth sense that Nick's house was on fire. She went to the wicket from where the house where her brother lived was clearly visible and made sure that her hunch was correct. Fire. At the top of her voice wailed Betty and skipped to Nick on the move dialing the emergency number. When Betty ran up to her brother's house, the fire was slowly but surely growing. Without thinking, the woman kicked the door open with her foot. She ran into the house, where she got the strength from. She wet a rag and sold into her brother's bedroom and began to shake him. "Wake up, you idiot," screamed Betty. "Is your house on fire?" Sister forcefully pushed Nick and beckoned him toward the exit. The woman realized that every second counted another tug, and they were outside and just in time to fall to the grass. Betty saw the ceiling collapse. Before she lost consciousness, she thought she had made it just in time. People were running from all sides. The house where Nick had been happy for almost 20 years was extinguished quickly. But to restore it required a lot of money, which he didn't have. In fact, it was not even a question of restoration, but almost a full-fledged construction. Nick moved in with his sister. Michael helped them with household chores, planted potatoes, and willingly helped the children to do their homework. The youngest from the bench had a math problem. Nick stopped drinking. The house Betty lived in with her husband and 2 sons wasn't that big. So Nick couldn't help but realize that he had to come up with a place to live. But what could he think of? The village council only shook their hands, for there were no empty houses in the village. One day, Nick heard Michael ask his wife if he was moving at all. If he'd gone on a shift, it would have been good for him. We're not millionaires. He felt bad about embarrassing his sister and brother-in-law. That's why Nick thought it was a good idea. Except there was no money on the phone to go online, Betty. I hate to ask you for anything, but could you spare some for a poor hobo? 300, he asked his sister. Nick had been calling himself a hobo lately, either jokingly or seriously. What's that for? With suspicion, Betty asked. And has your brother been drinking? Don't worry, you're past that. Nick assured her with a grin. I want to look for a job ad. How long do I have to sit on your neck? Well, I'll get it for you. A couple days later, he found an ad for shift workers. When are you leaving? Betty asked. In a week. Nick called his daughter before he left. I'm happy for you, Helen exclaimed. I've been having all kinds of bad thoughts lately, but thank God you're okay. I should come visit you sometime. What do you think? We'll see, the father replied evasively. Nick was ashamed to admit to his daughter that the house where she spent her childhood was no longer there. The ex-wife apparently didn't know anything about it either. After all, Sophia now worked in the city and did not maintain relations with any of the villagers. Thomas and Sophia were 3 days away from getting married. "I can't wait for you to say yes to me in the face of the law," said the happy groom. The future spouses were having lunch at the very cafe where they had met at the hardware meeting. The faces of the bride and groom were shining and the people around them were smiling. "I look at you and directly infect with good mood," said the former to them Lola, head of the Department of Media Relations. "Are you so cool? Thank you for your kind words. Smile, Parker." The daughter arrived the evening before the wedding of moms. "You could put your face on the cover," Helen exclaimed, kissing her mother. "You look like $1,000,000. "A million?" Sophia smiled embarrassedly. "Right. Why am I being petty for $1,000,000? Oh, come on." With a laugh, she waved her daughter away. "You are not hungry." "I could eat an elephant," cheerfully admitted Helen. "But I can't promise an elephant," Sophia hummed. "But fried chicken, and I'll feed you. Come on," encouraged the girl. Almost a year of studenthood. I gave her a lot of fried chicken, but such a delicious Tina, as my mother, has not yet met. I hope the groom appreciated. By the way, where did he appreciate it? Did he appreciate it at the bachelor party now? Mother smiled. He, like you, was not afraid to let go. What about the cake stripper and other bachelor party trappings? You know, not afraid. I don't think our Thomas Stepanovich can be surprised by strippers anymore, or anything else for that matter. I'm very glad I got him for goulash. What about Daddy's sadness? Helen asked. It always seemed to me that you loved each other so much that there is no stronger. It did not seem. The daughter answered Sophia seriously. That's the way it was. But I guess our love just ran out of steam. It happens like that too. But I am grateful to Vanya that he was in my life. By the way, you called him a long time ago. The other day. How is he? He seems to be doing well. He's away on a shift. Oh well, God forbid he's doing well. There's a very nice woman coming, and we'll drink to that. Winked Sophia, the daughter's bachelorette party. Helen smiled understandingly. Or else. Mother and daughter laughed amicably. And then Kate showed up. The bachelorette party was a success. The next day, Thomas and Sophia became husband and wife. Wendy looked at her daughter under her dress with a concentrated frown. One could only wonder what grievances she would express to her new son-in-law. Nick returned from his shift a month later with a lot of money and a great mood. It would be better to solve the problem with housing. The tramp had arrived. He announced his arrival. Fresher, better looking, Sister said approvingly. The work has done you good. Very much so. I'll have to do something about the house. There'll be daylight. There'll be food. The housing problem solved itself. And not just housing. In the morning, Nick went fishing in the neighboring village. The fish pecked and not bad. And Corver learning to cook, which Betty was a great master. But the stars had prepared something more interesting for Nick. He pulled the rod, but it was obviously caught on something. Shit. Nick cursed and bent his lice and fell into the water. He surfaced. And headed for the shore, pulling the fish boat up behind him. Nick was walking through the village, soaking wet, and carrying a bag with a still living fish in it. But there was no cell phone in his pocket. Drowned in the river, and Nick, he heard a woman's voice. What are you doing here? Molly? Nick exclaimed in surprise. Unexpected. Yes, I came to go fishing. In fact, in their meeting, by and large, there was nothing unexpected. He knew that the head teacher had a mother living in the village. And yet, how did you manage to get so far away? Molly asked. The boat overturned. With a smile, he answered. And the former colleagues could not help laughing. That's what the amateur fishermen, said coworkers. And went to my place before the bus is still more than 3 hours. And it is cool outside. And it's comfortable enough. There was no one in the house except Molly. The head teacher gave him a t-shirt and a tracksuit, not forgetting to put the kettle on. I believe your mother lives here too. Nick showed his knowledge. She did, sighed her colleague. Mom died. 9 days yesterday. She came here to sort out her things. But what to do with the house? I don't know. My mom was very sick, and just before she left, she gave me a deed of gift. So they're thinking of selling it or keeping it for Ethan. The guy wanted to get married. At least he'd have a place to bring his wife. Ethan was Molly's son. He was a year older than Helen and went to Polytechnic. "Would you let the tramp stay here?" Nick asked. "What vagrant?" "The mistress of the house-me." Sadly, he replied, "You know probably that I'm having dinner at my sister's, but I'm tired of embarrassing them. Don't worry, I'll pay. Yesterday I came back from a shift. I make good money, and then I'll find a place to live." "What money?" Molly waved her hands. "You can live, of course, as long as you need." "Was it a nice house?" "A big one with 2 vegetable gardens, a garage, outbuildings, and a nice garden. Nick took good care of the house," for which Molly was very grateful. "Another question is who should thank whom?" Nick grinned. "When the landlady told him to thank you, she took in a hobo." "Well, what kind of tramp are you?" Molly objected. "Just a man in temporary difficulty." She visited the mother house almost every day. Both the residents and the child began to guess what was the matter. A fiancé had shown up. "Why are you, Molly, frequenting the village?" One day the sales clerk remarked, "I wonder if you're going to move there." "Who knows?" The widow smiled enigmatically. And when the villagers found out who was staying with her, everything fell into place. But Nick made no move to get closer. The coworkers began to speak to each other. But it didn't go any further than that. Molly realized that her lodgers needed time. After all, the man had recently gone through a difficult divorce. It was all settled on Christmas Eve. Molly's back from corporate. Beautiful, dressed up, new haircut. "You look good." Approvingly, Nick said, "That hair looks really good on you." All the men must have craned their necks. "Maybe," she smiled, "but it doesn't make any difference to me. And who's going to wring the neck of a drunkard who's old enough to be my son?" "Well, there is also a physicist," sneered Corver. "True, I think so. Doesn't distinguish a man from a woman anymore." "Well, you see," Molly waved her hands and laughed merrily. "Well, I think that women are always pleased with a man's attention. You like ears. Do you?" The widow asked quietly, looking Nick in the eye. "I love with my heart," he whispered back. The heart of the woman, tired of loneliness, anxiously went down. Did it mean that Nick's heart was not free and it still belonged to Sophia? And yet there was still a tiny hope. "The best counselor is the heart," Nick continued, catching her gaze. Now they were looking at each other. Molly suddenly realized she had a chance. Nick nestled against the woman's warm cheek, and he physically felt his heart thaw. And when their lips met, the man realized he was finally cured and ready to start life anew. "You are very beautiful," Nick whispered, hardly tearing himself away from her cop. Molly only smiled. She wished if Nick told her that, then things would work out for them. Nick and Molly spent that Christmas alone together. They didn't need anyone. They talked about everything in the world, made plans, and they had the best time of their lives. "How you celebrate Christmas is how you spend it," Nick said with a smile, pouring the rest of the champagne. "So don't get your hopes up. It's easy to get rid of me. At least for the next year." Outside the window, it was already starting to get matchmaking. And the lovers were thrilled to see not only the coming year together, but also the dawn. Both saw it as a good omen. Could it have been any different on this magical night? "I hope it doesn't happen in the next 20 years. Molly said quietly, snuggling into his shoulder. "Well, that's a bit pessimistic." Nick stretched out with courtly disappointment. "Here's the 30th thing. Molly, well, marry me. I realize I have nothing to offer you yet, but I promise it's only a matter of time. I have grand plans for this year, and shut up," Molly whispered, placing her fingers on his lips. "If you were a beggar, I'd still say yes. I'm not a beggar. It's just him. I'm a tramp. My favorite tramp. To us, to our happiness." They drank champagne and went to bed. In the afternoon, a blizzard broke out. Nick shook his head sweetly. "Shall we shovel the snow?" "And why do you want to yawn on a holiday?" asked Molly. "My joy. It's only half an hour's work. Then it's gonna snow even more. And then you and I will have a drink. Some wine." Nick went out into the yard and took a shovel, as suddenly he saw how the ambulance, which had left from the side of the cabins, drove into a snowdrift and began to tow frantically. The driver got out of the cab and started looking around nervously. The doctor followed him out, and the men began to gesticulate frantically. Nick picked up a shovel and rushed to the car, which was about 200 meters away. Men. "Do you need help?" he asked, out of breath. "How else?" exclaimed the doctor. "There's an elderly woman with a stroke. We can't bring the old lady." The driver got into the car. Nick started shoveling, and the doctor tried to push the car out. "Damn this blizzard." He cursed in his monologue with an expletive. The doctor pushed open the door of the patient compartment. Nick peered inside, and his hair stood on end. On the couch lay his ex-mother-in-law. Her mouth was curved to the left. One eye was closed, the other staring blankly into space. A nurse sat next to the older woman. Wendy blurted out to Nick. "Do you know her?" asked the doctor. "I do," exhaled Corver. "And who is she to you?" "How's that?" "Do you have any contact with your ex-wife?" "No," shook his head Nick. "I changed my cell phone not too long ago, but also." "And the son," spat the doctor contemptuously. "Drunk and sneaking around. I think he'll wake up and not remember that his mother was taken to the hospital, and he flatly refused to accompany. I can tell the daughter." It dawned on him the only number Nick remembered by heart. It was Helen's number. Notified, the doctor asked, and Corver suddenly thought he might not be able to reach his daughter. It's Christmas after all. Young people are out. Can I go with her? Unexpectedly, Nick volunteered. "Yes, please." The medic shrugged. The driver continued to slip, and the car moved off. "Thanks, buddy," shouted the driver Nick, and the doctor asked if he had changed his mind about accompanying the patient. Fortunately, his cell phone was in his pocket. He told Molly what had happened and asked her to go get a shovel. Nick's fears about Helen were justified. He didn't manage to get through to his daughter until the evening. "God, what a horror," the girl exclaimed. "And Mom is in Thailand with Dad Thomas. They'll be back in a week, but I can come." "Come, daughter, but here's the thing," he hesitated. "Anyway, I'm living in the village now." "What are you doing there?" Helen was stunned. "Daughter, I'll see you later. Write down the address." After talking to her father, Helen was discouraged. What's so strange, though? Her father was able to find a woman and go to her in the village, and they spent Christmas together. This could only make Helen happy. Dad had found the strength to start a new life. He loves, is loved, and as a consequence, is happy. What more could a daughter want? Yes, but Dad said he was living there. Why not at his place? I'll come and see everything with my own eyes. Dad sounds like he's doing well, and if it's as good as I think it is, it's great. With a positive thought, Helen fell asleep. Helen managed to get a ticket only for January 4. The village was almost no different from her native village. Even the store building looked exactly the same as it had with the baby. The house where Helen's father now lived she found quickly. She knocked on the door not boldly and heard a vaguely familiar female voice. "Come in. It's not locked." When the girl entered, she was stunned Molly. Helen exclaimed in surprise when she saw the head teacher. "Yes," Molly said, the woman embarrassed. "That's the way it is. Where's Daddy?" "Is Daddy coming?" There was an awkward pause. "And Helen." Nick shouted joyfully and kissed his daughter on both cheeks. "Daddy is touched," said the girl, hugging her father. "I missed you so much." "Me too," Nick admitted. Tears also appeared in the man's eyes. "But thank God, you are here. And please come to the table. And yes, guys, let's go to the table." Having coped, finally, with indignation, cordially invited Molly. "Dad, Molly, so are you together?" with a smile asked Helen. "Yes," simply replied Nick. "I hope you two are friends." "I'm thrilled," assured her daughter. "I have 4 parents now, you might say. Sorry, stupid joke. But why?" "A silly one that doesn't agree with their father's choice. I, for one, am very pleased." After the first glasses were knocked back and the first hunger was removed, Nick and his daughter started talking about everyday life. "How's Grandma doing?" Helen inquired. "Grandma will now need a nurse and a wheelchair." With a sigh, the father replied. "But even that's not the point. Sashka and his heroines don't want to take Wendy away. And why? Because they're assholes." Nick cut him off. "Besides, Uncle, as you know, always liked to drink. What a sick mother. And if his son doesn't need her, what about his Natasha? What kind of horror stories are you telling?" Helen shuddered, and this daughter is not horrors, but the harsh truth of life, philosophically remarked the father. I hope I don't suffer the same fate in my old age. No, of course not. Wendy was conscious and already knew that if it hadn't been for her ex-son-in-law, there was no telling how things would have ended. For 2 days, my ex-mother-in-law barely spoke about me. I mean, he saved my life. And I'm fine. Wendy? Nick smiled, squeezing her hand. The main thing is that you get better. Where's Sophia? Asked the older woman. And tears appeared in her eyes. She doesn't ask about Sasha. A thought crossed my mind. So she realizes that her son doesn't need her. Sophia has gone on vacation. How will she come back? She'll be back. She already knows everything. Really, her son-in-law reassured her. A nurse came into the room and said that the patient needed to rest. Yes, of course, nodded Nick, and walked out. He visited Wendy every day, fed the old lady from a spoon, wiped down Molly's cooking, and ducked out after her without complaint. You're a good man, the ex-mother-in-law said. And Nick smiled involuntarily. If a year ago someone had told Nick that his ex-mother-in-law would say those words, he would have twisted his finger at his temple. What was a year, a week Nick was pleased to note that Wendy was on the mend. Her speech was no longer so frozen, but her leg paralysis was. As the doctor had assured her, was a matter of time. It was not only the doctor's merit, Molly assured her. A kind word is good for the cat. I think Wendy's quarrelsome nature was a kind of defensive reaction. But I think things are going to change now. Love and kindness works wonders. Hearing these words, Nick remembered what his future spouse had said. It looks like that's the way it's going to be. His Molly is rarely wrong at all. You're a very good man, Wendy repeated. Well, I'm flattered, Nick replied. Sentimental impulses. A few days later, Wendy was discharged. A couple of days before the discharge, Nick called his ex-wife, and Sophia assured him that she would take her mother back to her house. Admittedly, honestly, Corver was dreading this conversation. He himself could not understand the reason for his fear, but the fact remained. When Nick heard the voice of his ex-wife, he was surprised that he was absolutely not excited. They had a very nice conversation, and Nick even told his ex-wife that he would soon get married. Well done, Sophia said approvingly. I hope it's a worthy woman. You bet she is. I know her, the ex-wife inquired. Answered Nick with a grin. Molly, the vice principal. Oh, come on. Well, congratulations. You're gonna invite me to the wedding. Well, why not? The former spouses warmly said goodbye, and Nick felt as a mountain fell off his shoulders. Why, I wondered, was he afraid? As Parker gently coaxed his mother-in-law into the car. Wendy, are you comfortable? I'm fine, replied the old woman, and suddenly said, you know what I just thought about, and what is it? Nick, who was sitting in the front seat, asked. That both my sons-in-law are good people. Sonia has good taste after all. Both sons-in-law, as if on command, laughed deafeningly. Molly, who was sitting next to Wendy, also smiled. We try, Thomas said cheerfully and started the car. And waiting for her at home were her daughter, granddaughter, and a holiday dinner. 3 years later, a few days before the defense of the diploma, Helen felt indisposed. Everything pointed to the fact that the future journalist is in an interesting position. When the test showed 2 stripes, Helen cried. What are we crying about? He asked. After all, we wanted to get married. So the 3 of us are going to get married. That's all. Are you really happy? I'm really happy. 4 parents. What did Helen jokingly call them? They were happy too, and Wendy had nothing to talk about. So I'm going to be a great-grandmother, she smiled. Yes, nodded her daughter. Oh my God, I'm going to be a grandmother. That's so exciting. It's like a baby boom, Nick said when he found out he was going to be a grandfather. A year ago, he became a father for the 2nd time. Almost all the money he earned on his regular shift was spent on Echo. And in the end, Nick and Molly became parents to an adorable little dumpling. So the baby-to-be has an aunt who's only 2 years older than him, or a little less. Nick led the eldest daughter to the altar, where the groom was waiting for her and thought what a lucky man he was. And Sophia, Molly and Thomas were thinking in unison that one should not be afraid of change. Change isn't always a bad thing. They knew that.